You're doing it wrong. That was the first thing I heard that morning. Not birds, not wind. Leon Yu, sitting cross-legged on the good flat rock, eyes closed, breathing like a monk, informing me that my life was incorrect. I was in a horse stance, thighs shaking, sun coming up over the hill behind St. Spirit Village like it had a personal grudge against my face. Sweat running into my eyes and me not wiping it, because wiping it would mean admitting my arms existed. Wrong how, I said. Your weight's on your toes, and you don't have a cultivation method, so it doesn't matter anyway. See, that's the thing about Leon Yu. He never insulted you, he just stated facts, and the facts happened to be shaped like a knife. His father was Leon Kwong, the village blacksmith, which meant Leon Yu had a family technique, mysterious heaven skill, passed down through generations. I had a grandfather who ran the village, and a stance I'd invented by watching a heron. 3 seconds. That's how much older I was than him. Elder Giles told me once, in the same breath as which chicken laid better. 3 seconds, and I'd been holding it over Lian Yu's head my entire life, like a trophy from a competition nobody entered. You know what your problem is? I said, thighs screaming. You think a technique makes you strong. It does. Everybody needs a reason to live. I said it half to myself, honestly. It just came out of me, the way tired things do. That's what makes you strong. And the sky said, bite. Not out loud, inside my skull, sharp and cheerful, like a shop bell in an empty store. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Sun Wu. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize. Would you like to activate the lottery wheel? I stood up out of the horse stance so fast my knees popped. Wei Lin? Shut up for a second, because there was a wheel in my eye. Not in front of my eye, in it. A ring of little slices spinning slow, each one glowing with something I couldn't read yet, and floating over the whole thing a word so pretty it should have been illegal. Yes. I picked yes. Obviously I picked yes. You would have picked yes. The wheel spun, the wheel slowed, the wheel stopped. And then somebody poured a library into my head through a funnel. That's the only way I can describe it. Every muscle in a spear thrust, every angle, the exact moment your back foot leaves the dirt, the weight shift, the breath, the way your ribs have to twist a half beat before your shoulder does. 10,000 hours of a dead general's practice delivered into my brain in about a second and a half, like an entire winter of firewood dropped through the roof. I sat down in the grass. I may have made a noise. Wei Lin! Lian Yu was actually off his rock now, which for him was basically a scream. What's wrong with you? Headache. My eyes were watering. Really, really good headache. Relentless charge. That was the name that came with it. Sun Wu's opening move, the one that closes distance before the distance knows it's being closed. I picked up a pine branch. It was a bad pine branch. Crooked, thumb thick, still had needles on one end. I looked at the boulder across the clearing, the big one we used to sit on before Lian Yu claimed the flat one, and my body moved without asking me first. I didn't run at it. That's the part I want you to understand. Running is what a person does. This was more like the ground offered to help. 1 step, and the second step was already 15 feet later, and the branch went into the boulder, and the branch exploded, and I bounced off and landed on my back in the dirt like a dropped sack of turnips. Silence. What was that? Said Lian Yu. Practice, I said to the sky. I got up. My whole right arm was numb from the elbow down, and I have never in my life been happier about a numb arm. I did it again, and again. By the 10th time, I stopped bouncing off things and started going through them, and the pine branch was down to a stub, and Lian Yu had stopped pretending to cultivate entirely and was just standing there, watching me with a face I'd never seen on him before. Not jealousy. Lian Yu was too well raised for jealousy. Calculation. He was recalculating me, live, and he didn't like the numbers. Race you home, I said. You can't beat me home. I take the ridge. I know. Go. He went. Lian Yu, at 11 years old, was fast in the way village boys are fast, which is barefoot and shameless, and he had the ridge trail memorized down to which roots would trip you. He was 30 feet up the slope before I finished tying my sash. I caught him at the first bend, not running. Charging. Plant. Twist. Gone, and the world smeared, and I passed him close enough to feel him flinch. I let him catch up. Then I did it again at the second bend, just so he'd know the first one wasn't luck. My foolish little brother, I called back down the hill. Do try to keep up. Welcome the same age. 3 seconds. He didn't talk to me for the rest of the run, which honestly was the best part of my morning. Elder Giles was in the yard when we came down, feeding chickens and complaining about them at the same time. My grandfather, not by blood, he was the village chief, 70 years old, built like a bundle of sticks somebody had tied up and taught to argue, and he'd raised me since I was 5. "You're filthy," he said. "I've been training. You've been rolling." He grabbed my chin and turned my face like he was checking a melon for bruises. "1 month to the awakening ceremony, boy. 1 month. And you want to show up at the spirit hall with a broken nose and grass in your hair? There's no grass in my hair." He pulled a piece of grass out of my hair and held it in front of my face without a word, which is the single most devastating thing an old man can do to you. "Eat," he said, "and listen. Do not lose to old Tang's 3rd son at that ceremony. I have to sit next to that man at village meetings. Do you understand what that's like? He doesn't blink. 70 years old, and I have never once seen that man blink." That was Elder Giles. Every piece of love he ever gave me came wrapped in a complaint about somebody else. Inside, over millet porridge, I turned it over. Sun Wu. That was a name from another life, a life with cars in it, and phones, and me dying in it at some point, though the details had gone soft years ago like a dream you only remember the shape of. I'd quoted a line from a game, and a wheel had spun and put a dead general's spear technique in my hands. So I tried an experiment. Lian Yu was at the door, still sulking, still not talking to me. I looked right at him and said, in my most serious voice, "You and I are brothers, but if you keep looking at me like that, I'll have to kill you." Which is not a thing you say to your best friend at breakfast. Lian Yu's mouth opened. "Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Kageyama Ryota. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize." I have never in my life smiled harder at a bowl of porridge. Yes, spin it right now. The wheel came up with a slice I couldn't look away from, and I want to be clear about something. On that wheel, in among the abilities and the trinkets, there was a slot with Itachi himself on it. The man, available. 1%, the system told me, cheerful as a shopkeeper. 1% chance to pull the actual person out of the wheel and into my world. I didn't get the person, I got his eyes. The 3 Tomoe Sharingan poured into my skull the same way the spear had, except this time, it went behind my eyes and stayed there, warm, patient, like something waking up and deciding it liked the neighborhood. Elder Giles looked up from his bowl. "Why are your eyes red?" "Sunrise," I said. "It's been up for an hour." "Long sunrise." He grumbled something about boys and went back to his porridge, and I sat there with a dead clan's bloodline limit in my head, eating millet, in a village of 400 people who farmed. Here's what I did with the eyes for the next week, and I'm not proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it either. I'd like that on the record. Every morning, Lian Yu practiced his family's secret arts on that hill. Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, which is a footwork method. Mysterious Jade Hand, which lets you handle heat and force without your skin coming off. Controlling Crane Catching Dragon, which is exactly as fancy as it sounds and involves stealing a weapon out of somebody's grip from 6 feet away. Every morning, I sat downhill from him with my chin on my knee, looking bored, eyes on fire. The Sharingan doesn't just see fast, it copies. Every angle, every weight shift, every breath, filed away permanently the first time it crosses your vision. The Tang sect spent hundreds of years developing techniques they'd kill outsiders for looking at, and I acquired the full set in 9 mornings, for free, while pretending to be sleepy. By day 10, I decided I needed to test it on something that hit back. The village had a bull. Bad bull. Everybody's bull, technically, and everybody's problem, specifically. It had put 2 men in bed that year, and it had a look in its eye like it was keeping a list. I found it in the north pasture, and I made a noise at it, and it made a decision. You want to know what a charging bull looks like when the world has slowed down? It looks embarrassing. It looks like it's been telegraphing since Tuesday. I stepped around it with Ghost Shadow Perplexing Track, which is a footwork method belonging to a clan I was not a member of, and put myself behind a banyan tree. The bull hit the banyan tree. The banyan tree won. Barely. While it stood there having a long think about its life, I planted my feet, wound my ribs, and put relentless charge into the side of its skull with the butt end of a farming pole. The pole snapped. The bull sat down like a drunk uncle and went to sleep. I stood over 800 pounds of unconscious livestock, holding half a stick, and had exactly one thought. I need a real weapon. Lian Kuang's smithy opened at dawn, which is why I went at the hour before dawn. I want to be clear that I did not steal anything. I borrowed a forge. There's a difference, and the difference is that I intended to give it back, and also that I left before he woke up, which is the same thing as permission if you don't think about it too hard. The hammer was the problem. Lian Kuang's hammer was a monster, 70 or 80 pounds of head on a haft as thick as my wrist, and it was sitting there in the dark, daring me. I picked it up one-handed. Here's the part I didn't understand yet. For about 2 years, Elder Giles had been feeding me a red fruit. Every few months, he'd come back from somewhere with one of them. Ugly little thing, tasted like a plum that had given up, and he'd sit there and watch me eat the whole thing and refuse to explain where he got it. I thought it was an old man being weird about vitamins. I picked up a 70-pound hammer one-handed at 11 years old and swung it like a stick. Not vitamins. I worked till the sky went gray. Fold, heat, fold, hammer. I wasn't a smith, but I'd watched Lian Kuang work for 6 years, and now I had eyes that never forgot anything, and between the two of those, I got a spearhead out of it. Ugly. Honest. Sharp along the whole leading edge, with a spine on it thick enough to take a hit without folding. And when I pulled it out of the quench and turned it in the light, I heard breathing behind me. Lian Kuang was standing in his own doorway, watching me. Big man. Beard like a hedge that had been through something. Village blacksmith, hard drinker, sleeps till noon. That was the whole file on him, as far as the village was concerned. He didn't say a word. He was looking at my hands. I looked down, not a blister on them, not a mark. I'd been hauling glowing steel around a forge for 4 hours with my bare palms, because mysterious jade hand was in my hands now, and I'd stopped noticing. The Tang sect's inner court hand technique, in the palms of the village chief's stray grandson. Lian Kuang looked at my hands for a long, long time, and then he turned around and walked back into his house and shut the door. I found out much later what he was thinking in that moment, and it was this. Once in 100 years. This one is once in 100 years, and my son is going to spend his whole life chasing him. He was half right. The fight happened 3 days later, and it happened because Lian Kuang couldn't keep his mouth shut. He said it at dinner, apparently, in the flat way he said everything. Look at the chief's boy. Look at what he did with a hammer he shouldn't have been able to lift. Why can't you? Which is a thing fathers say, in every world I've ever lived in, and it never once in the history of anything has helped. So Lian Yu came up the hill that evening with his jaw set. You copied the Shentian Baojian. The what? My family's manual. You copied it. His voice was doing something I'd never heard it do. I've been watching you. Your footwork. Yesterday you caught a thrown stone with 2 fingers. That's controlling crane-catching dragon. Wei Lin, that's ours. That is 130 years old, and it is ours. I could have lied well. I had all the pieces for a good lie right there. Instead, I put my hands behind my head and said, You think so? Guess. Reader, that was a mistake. Lian Yu came off the ground at me so fast I actually respected it. 11 years old, no spirit awakened yet, and he came in with the full inner court sequence, elbows tight, no wasted motion, aiming to put me on my back and keep me there. And I watched it arrive like it was mailed to me. That's the thing nobody tells you about copying somebody's technique. It's not that you can do what they do, it's that you know what they're going to do, 1/2 beat before they know it, forever. He threw the palm strike, and I was already gone. He shifted into the footwork, and I shifted into the same footwork, mirrored, and stayed exactly where he didn't want me. Every single thing he had, I had, and I had it out of his own hands. You can see the moment a person stops fighting you and starts fighting the situation. Lian Yu's eyes went from angry to frightened in about 4 exchanges, and he stopped holding back, and he came in for real. So I stepped back, and I said the only line that fit. Even in death, I will not disgrace the name of Hanzhong Guan Yu. Fight! The wheel didn't even have the decency to wait until he'd finished swinging. Dragon piercing the clouds. 3 thrusts. That's the whole ability. 3 thrusts in a line, each one carrying a crack of light down the shaft, and they don't arrive one after another so much as they arrive at the same time in 3 different places. I hit him with all 3 in the chest, blunt end, no spearhead. Lian Yu went down on his knees in the grass and stayed there, arms shaking, unable to make his body answer him. Not hurt, just switched off. The way a leg goes when you sit on it wrong, except all of him. I put the spear point at his throat, held it there for exactly as long as it took him to understand it was there. Then I turned around and walked down the hill. Yang Ming! I kept walking. Yang Ming, where did you get that? Which was a very good question, and I did not have a single answer for it that wouldn't sound like a madman describing a shop bell in an empty store. So I let him yell, and I went home. And I lay in the dark, listening to Elder Giles snore through the wall, running my thumb along the spine of a spearhead I'd made with somebody else's hammer, and I thought about the wheel. 1%, it had said. 1% to pull the person himself out. I fell asleep doing math. You need to know what an awakening is, or none of the rest of this lands. In this world, at 6 years old, everybody wakes up something. A spirit. It comes out of you, and it's yours forever, and it's usually garbage. Farmers wake up hoes. Cooks wake up ladles. The spirit hall runs the ceremony in every village on the continent, hands you a certificate, and files you away. If your spirit is good and you're stubborn, you become a spirit master, and you climb. 10 ranks. Spirit Scholar, Spirit Master, Spirit Sage Master, Spirit Elder, Spirit Ancestor, Spirit King, Spirit Emperor, Spirit Saint, Spirit Douluo, and at the very top, titled Douluo, of whom the entire continent has maybe 50, and every one of them can flatten a town if they wake up in a mood. Each rank 10 levels. Every 10 levels you go kill something ancient in a forest and take a ring out of its corpse, and the ring goes into you and it gives you an ability. 100-year ring, yellow. 1,000-year, purple. 10,000-year, black. Nobody sensible touches a black one under level 40 because taking a ring you can't hold is a very fast way to become a story people tell. That's the ladder. That's the entire world, top to bottom. I was going to be 11 at my ceremony, 5 years late, because my awakening got postponed the year my parents did whatever they did and left me on Elder Giles's doorstep. Long story. He tells it worse than I do. Anyway, that's the world. And a week before my ceremony, the Spirit Hall sent a man to check on us. His name was Xie Yu Chen, patrol deacon out of New Ding City, level 29 Spirit Sage Master. And he entered Saint Spirit Village at a full gallop on a black horse down the middle of the only street we had. I was coming out of the grain shed. I heard the hooves before I saw them, and I heard the scream after. Aunt Liu. 9 months pregnant, out getting water, and she went down in the road in front of the horse with her arms around her stomach. He didn't slow down. I want to be exact about this because I've had people tell me since that it happened fast, and maybe he didn't see. He saw. He looked right at her, and he adjusted his reins to go around, and he did not slow down, because slowing down was for people who lived here. I got to the middle of the road first. The horse came up, not because I'm impressive at 11, but because a horse has more sense than the man on top of it. Move, said Xie Yu Chen. Apologize. He looked at me the way you look at something on your shoe. He had a very fine robe and very soft hands, and a face that had never once been told no by anybody who mattered. For what? You nearly killed her. Nearly. He actually smiled. He leaned down over the saddle to make sure I'd hear it properly. Nearly. We haven't hit her yet, boy. Nothing happened. Are you going to move, or are you going to be a thing that happened? And there it is. That's the sentence. 10 years later, I can still hear the little pleased pause he put in the middle of it. I didn't move, so he took the riding whip off his belt and put it across my face. I got my arm up in time, mostly. It opened my forearm from wrist to elbow, and it stung so badly my vision went white at the edges, and while it was still white, I stepped in with dragon piercing the clouds and put 3 cracks of light into his ribs. He came off that horse. A 29 Spirit Sage Master, off his horse, into the dirt of a village he thought was beneath him, and for about 1 second I thought I'd done something. Then he stood up, and his spirit came out. A Lion King. Golden, huge, wrapped around him like a coat made of an animal, 2 rings turning at his feet, yellow, and he backhanded me. That's all. 1 hand. Not even a technique. I went about 20 feet and hit the wall of the grain shed and came off it and left blood on the road, and I lay there with my ears ringing, learning in real time exactly how far 11 years old and 2 lottery prizes gets you against a real spirit master. Far enough to make him angry, not far enough to matter. A genius, he said, walking over. Every village has one. Every single village has one, and every single one of them thinks, and then the road filled up. Not with warriors, with farmers. 40, 50 of them, coming out of doorways and out of fields with hoes and scythes, and 1 man with a length of firewood. And they didn't say anything clever, they just made a wall between him and me, and Aunt Lou was crying, and somebody's grandmother was screaming at a spirit sage master in language I'd never heard her use in church. And behind all of them, in the door of the smithy, Lien Kuang stood with his arms folded and looked at Xie Yu Chen. Just looked at him. I watched a level 29 Spirit Sage Master's face change color while a village blacksmith looked at him, and at the time I had no idea why, and I filed it under things to understand later. Xie Yuchen got on his horse. The awakening ceremony is in 6 days, he said to all of us pleasantly. I'll be conducting it personally. Then he looked down at me in the dirt, holding my arm. I spat blood on the road and said, one day I'll be a Spirit Sage Master, and when I am, you're going to pay for this. Wonderful, he said. I'll write it down. He rode out. Slowly this time, so we'd all get a good look. An elder Giles came and knelt in the road and picked me up, and he was shaking, and it wasn't fear. 6 days later, an hour before the ceremony, my grandfather tried to sell himself. I came into the front room, and Elder Giles was standing there in his good clothes, the ones he wore twice a year. He had them brushed and everything, and he was doing that thing old men do where they hold their own hands. Wei Lin, when we get there, I want you to stay by the door and say nothing. Why? Because I'm going to kneel to him. I stopped in the doorway. He's from the Spirit Hall, Elder Giles said. He signs the certificate. You understand what that means? Without the certificate, no academy on the continent will take you. Not one. He can end your whole life with a pen and go have lunch. So I'll kneel. He'll enjoy it. He'll sign and he'll ride away. And in 10 years, nobody will remember except me, and I'm going to be dead in 10 years anyway. He said the last part like he was pricing a chicken. You're the village chief. I'm an old man who has one thing left. He looked up at me. Do not make me watch you throw it away over pride. I want to tell you I said something worthy of the moment. What I actually said was, no. Wei Lin, no. Look at me. I crouched down so he had to. In 6 days, I went from a stick to putting a Spirit Sage Master on the ground. 6 days. Grandfather, believe me, one day I'm going to be stronger than a titled Douluo. And on that day, I do not want to remember that you knelt to a man like that so I could have a piece of paper. He stared at me. Then he said, titled Douluo, in the voice you'd use for a child announcing he'd be marrying the moon, and hit me on the shoulder and went to find his hat. But he didn't kneel, and he didn't brush the good clothes again either. He wore them anyway. The village spirit hall was a shed. I want that understood. Every story about this continent makes the spirit hall sound like marble and gold, and in the cities it is, but in St. Spirit Village it was a shed with a stone basin in it, and every 6-year-old for 30 miles came through that door once and never again. There were 9 kids, 8 of them were 6. One of them was me, 5 years overdue, standing at the back like a man returning a library book he'd found under his bed. Xie Yuchen ran it personally, exactly as promised, in a fresh robe. They went one at a time. Hands on the basin, spirit power poured in, and out it comes. A sickle, a hoe, another hoe. A little girl woke up a watering can and burst into tears, and her mother said it was a fine watering can, and it was not a fine watering can. Then Lian Yu. Blue-silver grass came out of him, which is, and I say this with love, the single most worthless spirit on the entire continent. It's a weed. It grows in ditches. Village kids feed it to goats. The room made a noise, that awful sympathetic hiss a crowd makes when something dies in front of it. Xie Yuchen laughed out loud. And then the basin's reading came in, and the room stopped laughing, because Lian Yu had innate full spirit power, level 10 at 11 years old. That's not rare, that's legend. That's 1 in a generation, the kind of number the spirit hall sends letters about. Weed spirit, perfect talent, the universe having a joke at somebody's expense and not saying whose. I found out later, years later, that he also woke up a second spirit that day and swallowed it back down before anybody saw. His father's, the clear sky hammer in his left hand, and Lian Yu, 11 years old, made the decision in the space of a breath to hide it from the spirit hall and from me. We're going to come back to that. Then it was my turn. I put my hands on the basin, and Xie Yuchen leaned in over the other side with his elbows on the stone, so his face would be the first thing I saw when it went wrong. Any last words? He said, quietly, just for me. Before we find out you're a hoe, which, honestly, was an assist. There is no problem, I said, that cannot be solved with a blade. If there is, it's because I haven't drawn the right one. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Akali. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize. I said yes with my whole chest. The wheel spun in my eye while a level 29 spirit sage master stared into my face from 18 inches away and saw nothing at all. And the wheel stopped, and something cold and beautiful landed in my right hand. The mysterious blade, sword of the occult. Black-bladed short sword, plain hilt, no ornament on it anywhere, and it hummed once when it settled, like it was clearing its throat. And the system, helpful as ever, dropped the specification into my head like a receipt. Every kill makes it sharper. Permanently. No cap. No cap. Do you understand what no cap means? It means the sword has no ceiling. It means the only limit on that blade is how much of my life I'm willing to spend feeding it. It means that in 20 years, if I lived, I'd be carrying something that could cut a mountain in half sideways, and it would still be getting sharper. That thing came out of the basin as my awakened spirit. Not a prize, my spirit. The system converted it on the spot, and the basin lit up, and the basin kept lighting up. Innate full spirit power. 2 of us. In one shed. In one village of 400 people on the same morning. Xie Yu Chen did not move for about 4 seconds. His mouth was slightly open. Then he stood up straight and put his hands behind his back and got his face back on, which, I'll give him, took real professionalism. Congratulations, he said, a blade spirit, and full innate. Thank you. A genius that doesn't grow up, he said, is not a genius. He signed my certificate. I watched him sign it. He did it fast and neat and handed it to Elder Giles without looking at either of us, and then he walked out into the sunlight and got on his horse and left, and Elder Giles held that piece of paper in both hands the whole walk home like it was a live coal. Hold on to that. The certificate. It matters in about 11 days. That night the village cooked everything it had. 2 full spirit powers in 1 year. Saint Spirit Village had never produced one. There were tables in the road. Somebody killed a pig that was not scheduled to die. Elder Giles got about 4 cups into the rice wine and started making speeches at people who were trying to eat. Noading Elementary Spirit Master Academy, he announced, to a man who had not asked. Both of them, in the autumn, best in the province. That's expensive, Jack. I have money. He did not have money. He had a box under a floorboard with 11 years of chief stipend in it, which he'd been not spending since the day he found me on the step. I sat at the edge of it with a bowl I wasn't eating out of, looking at my left hand. Because here's the thing nobody in that road knew. When the basin lit up, it lit up wrong. It read full innate on my right hand, where the sword was, and it read something on my left hand, too. Something half-finished, a slot with nothing in it. The system put it plainly when I asked, in that shopkeeper voice it uses when it wants money. Left hand, partial awakening. 1 spirit vessel, empty. I had 2 spirit slots and 1 spirit. I asked how to fill it. The system gave me 2 doors. Door 1, go into a forest and kill something 1,000 years old and take its ring, the normal way, the way that has a fatality rate. Door 2, draw a prize good enough that the system will convert it directly into a spirit, the way it had just done with the sword. Meaning I now had a reason to keep talking. I looked across the table at Leon Yu, who was being congratulated by 4 adults at once about a weed, and who was smiling in a way that did not reach anywhere near his eyes. Foolish little brother, I said. Cheer up. It's a very nice ditch plant. He threw a bun at me. First thing he'd thrown at me in 6 days that wasn't an accusation. I took it as an apology and ate it. 3 months of turtles. That's the part of the story nobody puts in the songs. 3 months where nothing happened except that I got up before dawn and strapped a shell to my back. It was Elder Giles's, from the pond. He'd kept it on a shelf for 30 years, for reasons he could not articulate when questioned. It weighed about 40 pounds, it smelled like a pond, and it had a strap I made myself out of harness leather. I wore it while I ran. I wore it while I hauled water. I wore it doing the whole crooked heron stance I'd invented, and I wore it in the house, and after the 2nd week, the entire village had stopped commenting. The chickens got used to it before Leon Yu did. Why, he said, on about day 40, because when I take it off, I'll be faster. That's not how muscles work, isn't it? He thought about it for 3 days, and then he showed up at dawn with 2 sacks of river stones tied to his own shins, and neither of us ever acknowledged it out loud, not once, not in the entire rest of our lives. At the end of 8 weeks, I took the shell off, jumped straight up out of pure curiosity, and hit my head on the crossbeam of my own house. Elder Giles heard the noise from the yard and came in to find me sitting on the floor holding my skull, laughing, and the shell on the table, and he looked at the crossbeam and then at me and said, "You'll be paying for that beam." There was nothing wrong with the beam. Then it was autumn, and we were leaving. The whole village came out to the road. Aunt Lou came with the baby, who had arrived healthy in the middle of a thunderstorm and was named after nobody in particular. Elder Giles walked us to the crossroads with his hands behind his back, being casual about it so hard it was painful to watch. Leon Yu. Chief, look after him. Leon Yu glanced at me. I was carrying 2 packs, a spear, a sword, and a turtle shell. Yes, Chief, he said, and you. Elder Giles grabbed my collar and pulled me down to his level, which had gotten harder that year. Write. Not to say you're fine. Everyone writes to say they're fine. Write and tell me something true. Okay. Go on then. And that's how we left St. Spirit Village. 2 boys in a cart on a good clear day in autumn, waving at 400 people who never once in my life gave me a reason to leave them. Remember that road. We come back to it. Day 2, the road went through a cut between 2 hills, which, if you have ever read a single story in your life, you already know is a bad place to be. They came down both sides. 40-something men, mismatched leathers, good weapons. That was the part that caught my eye first, that the weapons were too good for the leathers. Somebody had outfitted them. They took the cart. They took Elder Giles's box, which he'd made me carry, which I hadn't known was in there. And then their leader, a big, flat-faced man with a scar across his mouth, walked around us twice and made a business decision. Boys are worth more than the coin, he said. There's houses in Newding that pay for pretty boys. Tie them. Then he looked past us at the old man, because Elder Giles had come. Of course Elder Giles had come. He'd told us he was walking us to the crossroads, and then he'd walked to the next one, and the next one, and he was 3 days from home, with no bag, being 70. And that one's nothing, the leader said. Old man, you want to keep your teeth? Crawl. He stood with his legs apart. Between. Go on. Crawl through, and I'll let you walk home. I have thought about that moment a great deal since. Not about what he said, about the fact that he said it in front of me, that he looked at an 11-year-old with a sword on his back and a spear in his hand and did not consider, even for 1 second, that it might cost him something. Elder Giles started to get down on his knees. I was up on the rock above them before he finished bending. The first man died before he heard me land. That's not skill, that's relentless charge, and the mysterious blade went in under his jaw and came out clean, and I felt the sword drink, and I felt it get sharper in my hand, physically, a little colder along the edge. Then it was 40 of them and one of me in a road cut, and the next part I remember in pieces. I remember getting cut across the shoulder. I remember Lian Yu's voice going up 2 octaves. I remember the leader shouting orders, and the orders being good, actually. He tried to box me against the rock wall, and it nearly worked. And I remember rolling behind the cart and finding a jar. It was the rice wine. Elder Giles's rice wine, the good jar, that he'd been carrying for 3 days to give us at the crossroads and had not given us yet. I pulled the stopper with my teeth and drank half of it. It went down like a lit match. It came back up as heat behind my eyes, and the sky over that road went very wide and very bright, and I laughed, and I said the only thing that fit. Bring me wine, and I'll write you 100 poems. Then let me sleep in the street, because I am a drunk overwhelm, and no emperor's boat is worth getting up for. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Du Zhou. The wheel spun so fast it blurred, Song of the Blue Lotus, and under it, folded into my head like a book falling open, the Blue Lotus sword formula, 9 levels of it. I had access to exactly 1. Level 1 is this. Your sword chi comes off the blade in the shape of a lotus opening, and it does not stop at the first thing it touches. I came out from behind that cart, drunk, 11 years old, holding a black sword, and I cut the front rank in half. Not through, in half. 6 men, 1 motion, and the blue light went past them and put a groove in the rock face behind them like somebody had dragged a plow across it. The road cut got very quiet in the way a room gets quiet when somebody's phone goes off at a funeral. Then they ran. And this is the part where I stop being the kid in the story, so pay attention because I want it recorded honestly. They ran, and I chased them. Not all of them made it out of the cut. 9 did. 9 got clear and made it up the slope and over the ridge and into the trees, with a head start in country they knew. I hunted every one of them down. It took most of the afternoon. The last one I found in a dry creek bed with his ankle broken, and he had a lot to say, and I let him say all of it, and then I did it anyway. Not because they'd robbed us. Because of what the leader said with his legs apart, in front of me, without thinking twice. When I came back to the road, Lian Yu had killed 8 of them. 8. 11 years old with a weed spirit and no ring, and he'd stood over Elder Giles and killed 8 men. And I want you to know that in any other story, that is the hero. He was sitting on the wheel of the cart when I walked up, and he looked at my sword, and then he looked at the ridge I'd come back over, and he did the math on how many had gone up there. All of them? All of them. And Lian Yu, who was the best natural talent that continent had produced in 100 years, said nothing at all, and I watched him understand that he was a firefly standing next to a house fire. There was a river a mile on. I went in with my clothes on. The blood came off the sword instantly, which was somehow the worst part, and it took a lot longer to come off me. I got about halfway through washing my arms before I had to stop and put my hands on my knees in the shallows and be sick into a river, at length, in front of my grandfather and my brother. 40-something men. First day I ever killed anybody, and I'd done it in bulk. Nobody said anything about it. Elder Giles came down to the water and sat on a rock with his feet in and waited. And when I was finished, he handed me the last of the rice wine, which I did not drink. Nuoding Elementary is the best in the province, he said to the river. But Nuoding has 3 academies, and the other 2 take working students. If the money's gone, we look at those. I'm telling you now so you don't spend the walk worrying about it, because I can see you worrying about it. They took everything. They took a box. He shrugged with one shoulder. I've been poor before. It's fine. It's boring, but it's fine. Lian Yu came and sat on the other rock, and we watched the water go past, 3 people with nothing. And after a while, Lian Yu said, "Brother." Through wind and fire. I looked at him. Village oath. 2 boys say it at 8 and mean it for a week. Through wind and fire, I said. We meant it that time, both of us. I want that on the record too, because of everything that comes later. Nuoding City had a wall, which was the biggest thing I'd ever seen, and Nottingham Elementary Spirit Master Academy had a gate which had a man in it, the doorman. I have met bishops since. I have met a man who could crack a mountain. Nothing on this continent has ever been as purely, distilledly obnoxious as the doorman of a third-rate academy in a provincial city. He looked at our clothes for about a second and a half. Enrollment's closed. It's the 1st of the month, said Elder Giles. For paying students, it's the 1st of the month. He leaned back in his chair. You want the working student intake, that's a separate application, and the separate application has a processing consideration. A what? A consideration. He rubbed 2 fingers together, in case, I suppose, we were stupid as well as poor. Elder Giles, who had walked 11 days, put the certificates on the desk. The doorman picked up Lian Yu's, glanced, put it down, picked up mine, and then he smiled, which was the first genuine expression he'd made. This one's forged. The road noise went away. That's from the Spirit Hall, said Elder Giles. That's stamped. I watched him stamp it. Then you watched a very good forger. Look at the seal line. Look at it. He held it up and waved it around, delighted, for the benefit of a small crowd that was now gathering. Country people. Every autumn. Some con man in a village sells them a paper, and they walk 2 weeks to find out. It's honestly sad. Take him home, Granddad, and if you find the man who sold it to you, well, Xie Yuchen had signed it in front of me. He had signed it in front of me, fast and neat, and handed it over without looking, and ridden away, smiling. And I had watched him do it and thought I'd won. I hit the doorman in the mouth. Not with a technique, I want to be clear. No spirit, no ring, no borrowed dead general. I just came over the desk and punched a grown man in the teeth, twice, and the second one took 3 of them out and put him through his own chair. The crowd made a lot of noise, and out of the middle of the noise came a voice like a man too tired to raise it. That's enough. He was maybe 30. Plain gray robe, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, and he walked like his back hurt. He looked like a clerk who'd lost an argument with a winter. You're bleeding on the paperwork, he told the doorman, and picked up my certificate. You read it for a long time, held it to the light, turned it over. Where did you get this? A Spirit Hall deacon signed it. Xie Yuchen, in front of me. He folded it and put it in his sleeve. Then we have a problem. Because this is a forgery, and it's a very confident one. Come with me. Who are you? Nobody important, said the man they called Sage Master. I teach here. Bring the old man. He doesn't look well. And that is how I met the greatest theorist alive on that continent, in a gatehouse, standing over a doorman I just deleted 3 teeth from. The Nuodong City Spirit Hall was not a shed. Marble floor, columns, a ceiling high enough to have its own weather, and behind a desk built for a much larger man, a fat, soft official named Thomas, who had already been paid. I knew he'd been paid the moment he opened his mouth, because he didn't look at the certificate. He looked at where the certificate was going to be before I'd put it there. Forgery, he said. Regrettable. Very common. Reissue it, said Sage Master. The boys registered. Check the ledger from St. Spirit Village. The ceremony was 3 months ago. The deacon's own hand is on the file. Ledgers can be tampered with. Then check the deacon. The deacon, said Thomas, is standing right there. Xia Yuchen came out from behind a column with his hands behind his back. He'd been waiting. He'd been waiting in a marble hall on the off chance we'd walk in that specific day, which tells you something about the size of a small man's patience. That's him, I said. I've never seen this boy before in my life, said Xia Yuchen, which was such an enormous, casual, load-bearing lie that I almost admired it. He'd whipped me in a road. He'd signed my paper in a shed. He'd told me a genius that doesn't grow up is not a genius. You conducted my awakening. I conduct 400 awakenings a year. You put a whip across my arm. Did I? He smiled at Thomas. Village children. They see a robe and they build a whole story around it. And Elder Giles went down on his knees on the marble. I didn't stop it. That's the thing. It happened at the speed old men move, which is slow. And I stood right there and watched it happen and did not stop it. Because for about 2 seconds, I genuinely did not understand what I was seeing. Your Excellency, my grandfather, on the floor, with his hat in his hands. I'm the chief of St. Spirit Village. I'm asking. The boy's awakening is real. You saw it. You were 4 feet away. Get up, I said. He's 11 years old with full innate spirit power, and you're going to throw that away because of me. If it's me, if I offended you, I'll say whatever you want me to say. Get up. Xia Yuchen kicked him, put his boot on my grandfather's shoulder, and shoved, and Elder Giles went over backwards onto the marble, and I heard his back hit, and I heard the sound he made, which was not a shout. It was smaller than that. It was the sound of a man who has decided not to make a sound and failed by a little. And then he tried to get back up onto his knees, because he wasn't finished asking. Something in my chest went very quiet. Look at this, Xia Yuchen was saying to Thomas, delighted, gesturing. This is what I mean about the countryside. They'll grovel for anything. It's not even dignified. There is nothing in this world, I said, that a strong enough flame will not burn. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Lin Dong. I did not say yes out loud. I said it so hard the word probably left a dent, and the wheel came up green. The green lotus core flame, 19th of the heavenly flames, a living fire old enough to have a temperament, and it did not appear in my hand, or over my head, or anywhere so convenient. It went into my empty left hand. I felt the slot close. I felt something enormous fold itself down small and settle in behind my palm like a cat deciding on a lap. And my left hand opened by itself, and a green flame the size of an apple sat in it and turned slowly and did not burn me. Second spirit. Twin spirits, on the same body, with innate full spirit power. The marble hall went absolutely silent, and then it went loud, because there were 40 people in that room, and every single one of them was a spirit master, and every single one of them knew what they were looking at. Twin spirits happen, rarely. Almost always the second one is garbage, a spoon, a comb, a thing that halves your growth rate for nothing. Nobody in that room had ever seen a second spirit that was on fire. Thomas stood up so fast his chair went over. I wasn't looking at Thomas. You, I said to Xia Yuchen, outside. You're 11. I'll wait, he laughed. He actually laughed, and I understood why. He was a 29 spirit sage master with 2 rings and a lion king, and I was a boy with a level 10 spirit power and a house fire in my hand. Fine, he said, since we're all here, since everyone's watching. They cleared the floor of the spirit hall for us. Marble, columns. Sage Master pulled Elder Giles back against the wall and kept his hand on his shoulder, and Lian Yu stood in front of both of them with a weed in his fist, and no rings at all, and did not move an inch, and I love him for that to this day. Xia Yuchen's Lion King came out full, golden mane, 2 spirit rings turning, yellow and yellow, and the pressure of a 29 Sage Master came down on that room like weather. I opened with Song of the Blue Lotus. The lotus came off the blade and opened across him and cut him 4 times, shoulder, chest, thigh, thigh. And every single cut closed, not slowly, instantly, like water finding level. Second ring, regeneration. That's what a Lion King buys you. Yes, he said, walking through the blue light. You're quick. Everyone's quick at 11. Now what? He hit me. Lion King strike, full weight, and I got the flat of the blade up, and it still put me through a column. I came out of the rubble on hands and knees, and while I was down there, he changed targets. He went for Elder Giles. 2 steps casual, 1 hand out to grab an old man off a wall and hold him up as a shield. And it is the single stupidest thing that man ever did, and he had a lot of competition. I hit him with relentless charge from the floor. Sun Wu's opening move, from a dead crouch, 30 feet in a blink, and I put my shoulder into his ribs and took him off his feet and off the ground entirely, and we went across the hall and into the far wall together, and I felt at least 3 things break in him. He got up anyway. Regeneration. He was going to get up every time, which was fine, because he was getting up in front of my left hand. You never asked, I said, what the second one was. I opened my palm. Green lotus core flame does not roar. That's the thing about it. Real fire, big fire, makes noise. This just went out from my hand in a sheet, silent, and the marble under it turned to glass, and when it went over Xie Yu Chen, there was a moment where I could still see the shape of him inside it, still trying to stand, still regenerating, healing as fast as he burned, and burning much, much faster. Regeneration is a wonderful ability. It has one flaw. It assumes there will be something left to regenerate. When I closed my hand, there was a black shape on the floor of the Nuoding City Spirit Hall, and it was still moving, a little, and that was all. Nobody clapped. I want to be clear about that, because in the stories, somebody always claps. 40 spirit masters stood pressed against the marble columns of their own building and looked at an 11-year-old, and not one of them made a sound. Thomas got his voice back first. There has, obviously, been a clerical error. He reissued the certificate himself, on the spot, with his own seal, at a desk, standing, while a burnt man made noises behind him. Then he put 100 gold coins on the desk next to it, in a stack, and then he added an enrollment slot at Nottingham Elementary as a gift from the Spirit Hall. And then he asked, in a voice like a man asking a dog whether it minds him leaving the room, whether there was anything else. There was one thing. Him. I pointed at the floor. When he can talk again, he goes back to St. Spirit Village, and he apologizes to Aunt Lou, out loud, in the road, where he nearly rode her down. Thomas blinked. That's the whole request? That's the whole request. I have never seen a man look so relieved and so confused at the same time. They did it too. 11 days later, on a good clear morning, in the only street St. Spirit Village had, Xie Yu Chen was walked out of a cart by 2 Spirit Hall clerks on legs that did not entirely work yet, and he stood in the road where the horse had been and apologized to Aunt Lou out loud in front of about 90 people. And then he was put back in the cart. Elder Giles described it to me in a letter, at length, twice, including the weather. And when the paperwork was done and Elder Giles was sitting down and Lian Yu had stopped shaking, the tired man in the gray robe came over and looked at me for a while. I'm going to say this once, said Sage Master. I've been studying spirits for 18 years. I know more about how they work than anyone alive, and I am not being modest. That's simply the situation. Twin spirits with full innate is theoretically impossible. I'd like to take you as a disciple. And here's where I made the coldest decision of my life to that point, because a teacher watches you. A teacher is in the room when the wheel spins. A teacher notices that a boy learns 9 techniques from a clan he isn't in and pulls a fire spirit out of the air in a marble hall and knows exactly what to say to make the sky ring like a shop bell. No, I said. I see. If it's a question of the fee, it's not the fee. I looked him in his tired, brilliant, ruinously observant eyes. You're not qualified to teach me. The room, which had gotten used to being shocked, managed it one more time. Sage Master stood there. He didn't get angry. That's what I remember. A man who had just been told that by a child, in public, and he simply nodded slowly, like he was writing something down inside his own head. He said. We'll see. I felt bad about it for about 6 years. Nottingham Elementary put working students in Dormitory 7, which was the one behind the kitchens, and Dormitory 7 had a hierarchy, and the hierarchy came to introduce itself before I'd put my bag down. You're in my bunk. He was 13, built like a door, and his name was Chen Wei. His spirit was a battle tiger, which is genuinely a decent spirit, and he had one yellow ring, which at 13 is respectable. Okay, I said, and moved my bag. He was so ready for a fight that it visibly hurt him. He stood there with his fists up and his whole speech loaded and nothing to aim it at. You think you're better than me? I think I'm tired. So he swung. I put him on the floor with 3 finger thrusts into the meat of his thigh, which is dragon piercing the clouds with about 2% of the power, and it's the most humiliating possible way to lose because there's no mark on you afterward, and your leg simply stops being yours for a while. He sat on the floor, holding his own leg with both hands, looking betrayed by it. Then I lay down on a bunk that wasn't his and went to sleep, because it had been an extremely long 11 days. The next morning, I met Mei Li, who kicked the door open. Who's the dorm head? She was 10, maybe. She had her hair up in 2 buns. She was standing in a fighting stance in a doorway at 6 in the morning, and she had come from the girls' side specifically to have this argument. Everybody looked at me. You are, I said. She lowered her fists about an inch. What? You're the dorm head. Congratulations. Is there food? I watched a small, violent person try to have a fight with a wall of agreement and completely fail to find purchase, and something in her face rearranged itself into a much more dangerous expression, which was interest. I'm Mei Li, she said. Wei Lin. I'm going to fight you later. Sure. She never did, incidentally. She just started following me around instead, which was worse. The cafeteria at Nottingham had 2 floors, paying students upstairs, working students down. On day 3, 4 6th graders came down the stairs to enjoy themselves. They started on a boy from our dorm named Small Liu, whose whole crime was eating a bun. The routine was comment on the bun, comment on his clothes, comment on his mother's job, wait for the flinch. They'd clearly done it before. There was a rhythm to it. I let it run 1 full cycle so everybody in that hall would remember it. Then I stood up and dumped Thomas's 25 gold coins on the counter. 25 gold. In a working student cafeteria, it sounded like a landslide. 2nd floor, I said to the cook. Everything. Everyone in this room eats upstairs today, on me. The hall did not react at first. It genuinely took a couple of seconds. Except him, I pointed at the 6th grader, and his 3 friends. They pay for their own. And then 100 and something working students realized what had just happened to them, and Nottingham Elementary's lower cafeteria came apart at the seams. I want to describe what 140 working students look like when somebody buys them a meal upstairs. They didn't cheer, that's the thing. There was a long, awful pause where about half of them looked at the cook to see whether it was a trick, and the cook looked at the coins, and then a girl of about 9 near the back stood up and started walking toward the stairs, and after that, it was a stampede with a cue in it. Small Lou did not move. He sat there holding his bun with both hands. Go on, I said. I've got a bun. Get a better one. The 6th graders came at me over a table. It was the sensible response. I didn't even draw. I have a spear technique from a dead general, a footwork method from a clan of assassins, and a copy of every move any of these 4 had ever made in a courtyard where I could see them. I hit them with the flat of my forearm, mostly. It took 11 seconds. The last one I caught by the collar on his way down and set upright on the bench so he could hear the rest. There's talent in everybody born, I said, to the room, because the room was watching, and the room was made of poor kids. It's going to be used. Money goes and comes back again. It's a poem. From another life. My mouth got it out before my brain caught up, and it landed on that cafeteria like snow. No bell. Nothing from the system. Turns out you have to quote the person, not the sentiment, and Douluo was already spent. But somebody at the top of the stairs heard it. Sage Master stood on the landing with a tray in his hands, listening to a child quote a poem that did not exist on his continent, and he did not come down, and he did not say anything. He went and found Lian Yu that afternoon and started teaching him instead. I'd like to say I planned that. I didn't. But it worked out extremely well for both of us, and Lian Yu got the greatest theorist alive to himself for 2 years, and I got left alone with a wheel in my eye. That night, the dorm swore itself to me. I want to say I talked them out of it. It was all very serious. Chen Wei did it first, on one knee by the bunks, with his legs still stiff, and then the whole room did it, and Small Liu cried. Get up, I said. This is embarrassing. You bought the 2nd floor, said Chen Wei. It was 25 gold coins. I have 75 more. You bought the 2nd floor. I gave up. Later, when they were all asleep, I went out to the courtyard and practiced the blue lotus sword formula under the moon, which is a phrase I now realize sounds ridiculous, but there was a specific reason. Level 1 wanted me to move slowly. That's the whole trick of it. The lotus opens at the speed the sword travels, and if you hurry the blade, the petals don't form. So I stood in a courtyard in the dark, moving a black sword very, very slowly for 2 hours a night, for months. The girls' dormitory faced that courtyard. I did not know that. By week 3, they were calling me the Moonlight Swordsman, which is the single most humiliating thing that has ever happened to me, and I only found out because Mei Li came and told me at midnight by climbing into my bunk. Move over. Mei Li. I want a story. Go to your own dorm. Tell me a story and I'll go. So I told her Dream of the Red Chamber. Badly. From memory, from a life I could barely remember having, half of it wrong, and she lay there with her chin on my shoulder and listened to the whole thing without interrupting once, which for her was a physical achievement. At the end, the part where the family comes apart and the boy walks off into the snow, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My mother's dead." Yeah? Somebody hunted her. Very flat, very small. A person. On purpose. When I was little. She said a name, too. I didn't recognize it then. I want to be honest about this because I've told this story enough times to know how tempting it is to pretend I understood the moment when it happened. Hu Lian. Just a name in the dark, from a 10-year-old with her face in my shoulder. I said something useless, the kind of thing you say. She fell asleep in my bunk, and I lay there awake until the sky went gray, thinking about a woman I'd never heard of, and about the fact that I had one black-bladed sword, a handful of green fire, and a level 14 spirit power. Nowhere near enough, for anything. Not yet. A month later, Sage Master came and offered to take us hunting. Not me. Us. He'd taken Lian Yu as a disciple by then, and he was very careful to phrase it as a favor to his disciple's brother, and he did it in that flat, exhausted voice, and I said yes because I needed a spirit ring and because I wanted to see what he'd do. He gave Lian Yu a going-away present in the carriage. 24 jade slots, a whole belt of them, hidden weapon storage, the kind of thing a Tang sect boy dreams about. Lian Yu held it like a baby. "That's very generous," I said. "He's my disciple." I looked out the window for a while because I'd noticed something 2 streets back, and I wanted to be sure. 2 men, tattooed faces. They'd been on us since the city gate, at a distance that was too consistent to be an accident, and they weren't hiding it well enough for professionals or badly enough for amateurs. I heard one of them, once, at a crossroads, over the noise. 4 words, "The traitor's descendant." Then the carriage turned, and they were gone. Right. I made a note of that, and I put it away, and I did not think about it again for 4 years, which in hindsight was insane, but I was 11, and there was a wheel in my eye, and I had priorities. Speaking of which, Sage Master, what's the most valuable thing a spirit master can own that isn't a ring? Storage, he said immediately. Space equipment. There are maybe 200 storage items on the whole continent, and every one of them belongs to a sect or a throne. I said, and then, out loud, to a carriage, 3 years of dochi and a set of clothes with no holes in them. That's all I want. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Lin Dong. Do you know what I won? His pants. His actual old training pants. From the wheel. From a world-shaking Flame Emperor's entire arsenal, the system handed me a pair of second-hand trousers, and then sat there in my skull radiating what I can only describe as satisfaction. I sat in that carriage next to a man holding 24 jade slots, holding a stranger's pants. Then, Sage Master asked me a follow-up question about spirit theory, and I answered it wrong on purpose, and my mouth ran on ahead the way it does, and somewhere in there I said something else that rang the bell. And the second spin came up with the Nethersea storage ring. 100 cubic meters, that's the number. 100 cubic meters of pocket space on a plain dark band that I slid onto my finger in the back of a carriage while a boy next to me admired a belt. "Is that a ring?" said Lian Yu. "It's a ring." "Is it a storage ring?" I put my arm inside it up to the shoulder and pulled out a chair. Nobody spoke for the rest of the ride. Sage Master looked out the window with the expression of a man doing very large sums in his head, and Lian Yu put the belt away in his bag, and I felt bad about that for at least 4 minutes. The spirit hunting forest is where you go to become somebody, and it's where most people go to stop being anybody. The rule is simple. You need a spirit beast that's lived at least 100 years, and the older it is, the better the ring, and the older it is, the more it would like to eat you. We were about 2 hours in when a tree turned into a lizard. I want to explain how good that camouflage is. I had the Sharingan. I had eyes that copy every angle of everything they see, and I had been looking directly at that section of canopy for maybe 40 seconds, and what I saw was branches. Then the branches blinked. Man-eating chameleon dragon. 30 feet of it folded into the branch pattern like it had been drawn there in the same ink. And it came down at Sagemaster because Sagemaster was in the middle and smelled the most like a man who had eaten recently. He moved. He moved both of them, actually. One hand on Lian Yu's collar, one step, and the two of them were 4 meters left of where the jaws closed, and I have never seen a man do anything more economically in my life. I went the other way, which put me on the far side of a 30-foot lizard from the only 2 people I knew. I got one cut into it, a good one, along the flank, and the flank went the color of the leaf litter as it opened, which was genuinely upsetting to watch. And then 2,000-year beasts started fighting each other somewhere above us. I never saw them properly. I saw the canopy come apart, and a shockwave went through that forest like a door slamming in a small house, and it picked the 3 of us up and put us down in 3 different places about a mile apart. I got up. I was fine. Being fine was, in hindsight, the problem, because it meant I took my time. Lian Yu did not get up somewhere else. Lian Yu got up in front of 2 men in the same uniform who had been waiting in that forest for 6 days. Guo Peng, Stone Turtle Spirit, Pure Defense, level 29. Xu Jie, Thorn Spirit, Control, level 29. Both of them wearing the tattoos. By the time I found them, they'd had him for a while. They'd been asking one question over and over, which was, "Where is Wei Lin?" And Lian Yu had been giving one answer over and over, which was, "Nothing at all." And then, when they broke something, he upgraded it. "You'll find him," he said, through a mouth that wasn't working properly. "Over my dead body." I heard that part. I want to be clear that I heard that part with my own ears from about 40 feet away in the trees. I came down and cut him loose and put him behind me. "Ah," said Guo Peng, "there he is." "Hello." "Nothing personal, boy." He was almost friendly about it. "Your father made enemies. That's all this is." "My father's dead." "Your father," said Xu Jie, "is a very interesting question." I opened with Song of the Blue Lotus, because it had cut 6 men in half in a road, and I put it into the stone turtle's shell at full extension. It made a sound like a spoon on a pot. That's the moment I learned the difference between a bandit and a spirit master. 40 men with good swords are 40 men. 1 man with the right spirit and 2 rings is a wall, and my best attack scratched the paint off him. So they took me apart. Xu Jie put thorns through the ground and pinned my feet. Guo Peng walked up and hit me the way you'd hit a nail. I went down. I got up. I went down again. By the 4th time, I couldn't feel my left arm. There was blood in my eye. And Lian Yu was screaming at them from the dirt where I'd put him. But I got them close together. That was the one thing I did right in that whole fight. I bled backwards for 2 minutes on purpose and got them side by side. And then I opened my left hand. Green Lotus Core Flame is not a fire attack. Fire attacks are what these people trained against. This is a heavenly flame, and it goes through spirit power the way boiling water goes through frost. Xu Jie was on the wrong side. He got the middle of it, and he came apart into ash while he was still shouting. Guo Peng got the edge of it and pulled his shell over himself and lived. Then he came out of the smoke and beat me half to death. I have thought about how to describe the next 30 seconds. The honest version is that I was on my back in a burning forest with a broken arm, and a man who could not be hurt was walking toward me, and my grandfather was 11 days away, and I was 11 years old, and I was going to die there. So I did the only thing I had left. I opened my mouth, and I reached for the biggest, loudest, most absurd thing in my memory. "By fire be purged! Bite." Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Deathwing the Destroyer. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize. The wheel came up, and it did not stop on an ability. It stopped on him. 1%. That's what the system had told me the very first week, cheerful as a shop bell, 1% chance to pull the person himself out of the wheel and into the world. And the wheel handed me a Fire Lord, now. It could not keep him. I want to be honest about the mechanics, because they matter. A being like that does not fit inside a level 14 Spirit Master, and the system knew it, and the system did what the system always does, which is make a business decision. It converted him into a spirit ring, a black one. Black is 10,000 years. Black is what a spirit emperor at level 60 goes into a deep forest and prays for. Black at level 14 is not ambitious, it is medically fatal, and it dropped onto me anyway and started to sink in. I've been hit by a lot of things since. Nothing has ever hurt like a 10,000-year ring going into a body that had no business holding it. It went in through my spine. I could feel it in my teeth. I was on my knees screaming into the dirt, and Guo Peng was standing over me confused because from the outside it looked like I'd simply started dying. And then the ring settled, and something in my chest opened like a furnace door. Flame demon body. I stood up in a forest that was now on fire in a wide circle, and I kept standing up, and up, and up, and by the time I was finished, I was 10 meters tall and made of a fire that did not flicker. Guo Peng looked up at me. He pulled his shell over himself. It was the correct move. Against anything else in that forest, it was the correct move. I put one hand on the shell and pressed, and the sand under him turned to glass, and the glass ran, and when I lifted my hand, there was nothing under it worth naming. The fire went out. I fell over. Lian Yu dragged himself across a burning clearing on one working arm to get to me, and he couldn't lift me, so he lay down next to me instead and yelled at me for a while, which is its own kind of medicine. I got him out. Both of us, mostly on my feet, and 6 ghost wolves came at us in the dark on the way, and I put my spear through all 6 of them without stopping to think about it, which frightened Lian Yu more than anything else that day. Sage Master found us at the tree line. He looked at the 2 of us. Then he looked past us at the mile of forest behind us, which was glowing. "What did you kill?" 2 men, I said, and a lot of trees. He put us in an inn on the road called the Lost Lamb, and got a physician and paid for it, and sat outside our door all night with his back against the wall. I lay in that bed and took stock, and the stock was strange. My first ring was black, 10,000 years. That should have made me the most dangerous 11-year-old on the continent, and it didn't, and here's why. A ring that size does not just give, it takes. It sat in my body, pulling spirit power out of the air for 10 miles in every direction, all night, every night, and it needed 3 times what a normal spirit master needs to move up a single level. 3 times. Forever. That was the bill. I lay there doing that arithmetic and decided it was the best deal I'd ever been offered. Somewhere around midnight, Sage Master cracked the door to check on us. He told me years later what he saw. He said that for about half a second, standing behind a sleeping 11-year-old boy, there was the shadow of something enormous with fire where its face should have been, and it turned and looked at him. He shut the door. He went downstairs. He sat in the common room until sunrise with his hands around a cup of tea he never drank. And he did not ask me a single question about it. Not one. For years. Which is, I think, the most respect anyone on that continent ever showed me. We got back to Nottingham to find my dormitory backed into a corner of the training field by 20-something 6th graders. Chief Wu. City Lord's son. He'd been at the cafeteria, which meant he'd been in the room the day I bought the 2nd floor, which meant he'd spent a month building this. He'd been smart about it, too. He hadn't come after Chen Wei or Small Lu. He'd cornered Mei Li and told the working students they could walk away, and about a third of them had started to. I'd like to say the whole dorm stood firm. 2/3 did. That's actually a very good number, and I've stopped being angry about the rest. "There he is," said Chief Wu, "the rich orphan." I don't remember what he said after that. There were 24 of them. Chief Wu went first, because he had to. His spirit was a rock ram, which is not a bad spirit, and he had 2 yellow rings and the confidence of a boy whose father owns a city, and he opened with a charge that would have gone through a door. I stepped inside it and put my elbow into his sternum, and he sat down. The rest came all at once after that, which was their best available option, and which I want to give them credit for. It took under a minute. I did not use a single thing off the wheel. No spear, no fire, no borrowed dead general, because they were 6th graders at a provincial elementary academy, and I had spent a month feeding a black ring, and using anything on them would have been like bringing a hammer to an argument. Chen Wei got 2 of them. He'd been waiting 3 weeks for that, and I stayed out of his way. When it was over, I made them walk laps of the training field on their hands, all 24, the full circuit. And small Liu went along the line with a brush and a pot of paint and drew a frog on each of their chests, and they had to hold the handstand while he did it, and if a frog smudged, they started the lap again. Sagemaster watched the entire thing from a window and did not intervene. The city lord came the next day to complain and left 40 minutes later having apologized twice, which I understand was Thomas's doing, and I have never learned exactly what the Spirit Hall said to him, because the Spirit Hall had opinions about me now. I'd registered by then, walked into that marble hall with my sleeve rolled up and let Thomas's people measure me, and I watched the whole department come to a halt. Black first ring, level 11 spirit power. The clerk measured me 3 times. He asked me to take my hand out of the water and put it back in. He got a second clerk. The second clerk got Thomas, and Thomas came out of his office at a speed that must have hurt him and stood there staring at a number that could not exist. That's a 10,000-year ring. Yes, you're level 11. I know. How are you alive? Stubborn, I said. He wrote it all down. He wrote it very carefully, in a good hand, and he sent it up the chain that same day. And a copy of that page went to Suotuo City and landed on the desk of a bishop, which is how the whole thing started, and I didn't know it for 4 more years. He came in the spring. Big carriage, white robes, a smile like a man handing out sweets. Bishop Valerius of Suotuo City. He brought me a present, and the present was Xie Yu Chen's career. Fired, stripped, and, in Valerius's words, dealt with. Delivered as an opening gift the way you'd bring wine to dinner. A small correction, he said. The Spirit Hall regrets it enormously. Then he made the offer. 500 gold coins a month. A stipend for my grandfather. Repairs and a school, and a well for Saint Spirit Village, which I had mentioned to nobody, which meant somebody had gone and looked. Training under a spirit hall titled Douluo. Everything. For a 12-year-old with a black ring and a debt of 3 times the normal grind, it was, objectively, the greatest offer anyone would ever make me. No thank you, I said. He kept smiling for about 2 seconds longer than a person keeps smiling. Consider it. I have. Boy, said Bishop Valerius, and his voice was still very warm. I have never once failed to get a person I wanted. Then he broke a vase on his way out. Not dramatically. He set his hand on a side table as he passed, and a vase that had been in that room since before I was born went to pieces on the floor, and he did not look back at it. I thought that was the end of it. I want you to understand, I thought a man like that got told no, sulked, and went home. He didn't go home. He went and did arithmetic, exactly like I had, on how to buy something that had refused to be bought. The squeeze came 3 weeks later, and it came through a doctor. Lian Yu had taken a bad hit sparring, genuinely bad, a torn spirit meridian, the kind of injury that doesn't kill you, but quietly caps your ceiling for the rest of your life. Sagemaster took him to the Spirit Hall Clinic, because the Spirit Hall Clinic is the only clinic, because the Spirit Hall makes very sure of that. Physician Zhao looked at the chart for a while. 5,000 gold coins. Sagemaster's voice did a thing I'd never heard. It's a meridian repair. It's a 2-hour procedure. 5,000. The physician had a lovely bedside manner. He never once raised his voice. Or, of course, if the young man is a member of the Spirit Hall, it's free. Members' families, too. Sworn brothers, for instance. He looked up at me. It's really a very generous policy. There it was. Not a threat. A price list. Lian Yu on the table said, "Don't." I stood in that clinic and did the arithmetic I'd been doing for a year, and for the first time it came out badly, and I felt the walls of the thing Valerius was building. He wasn't going to fight me. He was going to charge me, over and over, in things I couldn't refuse to pay. So I asked the physician a question. "Do you have a zither?" He blinked. "A what?" "A guqin, 7 strings, anything." There was one in the waiting hall, because Spirit Hall clinics decorate. I went and got it and sat down on the floor of a treatment room with it across my knees, and I said, to nobody, in the voice of a woman who had been carried off to a foreign country and made music out of it for 12 years, "When the song ends, my grief has nowhere left to go." Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Cai Wenji. Forget sorrow's melody, and with it, the whole of it, every callus, every fingering, 12 years of a master's hands, folded into mine in about a second and a half. I played. I'd never touched a stringed instrument in either of my lives, My hands knew exactly what they were doing, and I got to sit behind them and watch, which is one of the strangest experiences available to a human being. The room changed temperature. That's the only way to say it. The sound came out of that instrument and went into the walls, and Physician Xiao stopped mid-sentence with his mouth open, and Sage Master put a hand on the door frame, and Lian Yu's meridian closed. Not helped. Not stabilized. Closed, sealed, and better than it had been that morning, in about 4 minutes, on the floor, for free. I put the zither down. "Send the bill to the Spirit Hall," I said. "They can charge themselves." Physician Xiao did not say anything at all. He went and stood in the corridor for a while. Bishop Valeria stopped trying to buy me after that. He wrote to Suotuo City instead, and then to somewhere further up than Suotuo City, and the letter said, in effect, "This one will not be purchased and cannot be starved." And then, for a year, nothing happened. That's the part I think about most. A whole year of nothing. I ground. 3 times the normal spirit power for every level, every day, in a courtyard, in the dark, moving a black sword very slowly. Level 15 by the end of it, which for anyone else would be embarrassing at 12, and for me was a small war. Nothing happened, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. Because he was being thorough. And in the meantime, I ground, and I want to describe the grind, because the grind is the actual story, and everybody skips it. 3 times. That was my rate. A black 10,000-year ring in first position pulls spirit power out of the world constantly, and it is never full, and every single level cost me 3 times what it cost the boy in the next bunk. Lian Yu went from 15 to 22 that year. I went from 13 to 15. 2 levels. In a year, at 3 times the effort. Do you know what that does to a person? I'd stand in that courtyard at 3 in the morning, moving a black sword very slowly through the blue lotus form, 108 repetitions, and feel absolutely nothing move inside me, night after night after night. Chen Wei found me out there once, around the 8th month, sitting on the steps with my head against a pillar. "You all right?" "I'm slow." "You're the strongest person in this school." "I'm slow," I said. "And there is a man in Suotuo City who is not slow, and he is doing something right now, and I don't know what it is." Chen Wei thought about that. "Then get up," he said, and went to bed. I got up. That's the entire technique. There isn't a better one, and I've looked. We went home for the new year. Lian Kuang was gone. Not dead. Gone. The smithy was cold. The door was shut, and he'd left exactly one thing behind, which was a message with Elder Giles that said, "Look after my son." That's it. That's the whole message. A titled Douluo, hiding in a village as a blacksmith, walked out on his 11-year-old and left him with a 72-year-old man who ran a village of 400 people, and I watched Lian Yu read that message about 6 times looking for a second half of it. He didn't cry. He put it in his sleeve and went and cleaned the forge, which was already clean, for 4 hours. The next morning, he wanted to fight me. "Both of us," he said, "me and Mei Li, together." "That's not a fight, that's a mugging." Wei Lin, and I looked at his face and understood what he was actually asking for, which was not a fight. His father had walked out 4 days earlier and left 1 line of instructions, and Lian Yu needed to hit something that would not break, and I was the only thing in that village that qualified. So we went up the hill, and I let them come. Lian Yu had 2 years of Sage Master in him by then, and a mind like a trap, and he'd built an actual plan. Mei Li closes, he controls, they take me to the ground. And it was a good plan, and it worked for nearly 9 seconds. Mei Li is fast in a way that isn't fair, and she got inside my guard twice, and the second time she had my arm. Then I hit Blue Lotus level 2. Level 1 puts the lotus on the blade. Level 2 takes the blade off the blade. Sword chi off the fingertip, no weapon at all, and I put a line of it into the grass between us that opened the hill from my foot to the tree line. They stopped. I walked out through the gap I'd cut and picked up my coat and went down the hill, and behind me I heard Mei Li say, very quietly, "How far ahead is he?" And Lian Yu said, "We can only look up." I have regretted a lot of things I did that year. Walking away instead of turning around and saying something is near the top. I asked Elder Giles about my father that afternoon. I'd never asked. 12 years, and I'd never once asked, because I was afraid the answer would be short. It was short. 7 years back, he said. Rain like the end of the world. 2 men came through, and one of them was old Tang, and the other one was carrying you. What did he look like? Tall, tired. He thought about it. Spoke funny. Not our accent. Southern, maybe. Star Luo, if I had to guess, and I'd rather not guess. What did he say? He said, his name is Wei Lin. Elder Giles scratched his jaw. Then he put you on the step and walked back out into it. That's all? That's all, boy. I'm sorry. I've told you every word I have, and I've been saving them for a long time, in case you ever asked. I said thank you. I meant it. I want that conversation on the record, because it was 3 days before, and because it's the last long conversation the two of us ever had sitting down. They came at dawn. I heard the horses first. That's what I remember about the start of it, that it began the same way Xie Yu Chen began, with hooves in the only street we had, and for about 1 second I thought, oh, is that idiot back? 200 riders, black armor, no colors, no banner, the Blackwater mercenary group, though I didn't learn the name until later. And they came in through both ends of the village at once in 4 teams of 50, which is not a raid, that's a formation. That's people who were paid by the head and briefed on the layout. They set the granary on fire first, which tells you they had no intention of taking anything. I came out of Elder Giles's house barefoot with the mysterious blade in one hand. Look, I've described a lot of fights in this story, and I'm going to describe more, and most of them are fun, because most of them were. This one isn't. I'm going to tell it straight and quickly, and then we'll move on. St. Spirit Village had 400 people. About 60 of them could fight, in the sense that they owned a hoe. Lian Yu and Mei Li came out of the smithy at a dead run. The 3 of us met in the middle of the road, and we did the only thing there was to do, which was hold the street and let people run past us toward the fields. I killed 11 men in the first minute. I know it was 11 because the sword told me. Every kill, colder, sharper, a little easier, the count going up somewhere behind my eyes like a shop bell that had stopped being cheerful. We held the street. Then the second team came around from the pasture side, and we lost the street, and we held the well. Then we lost the well. We backed through the alleys with people behind us and fire on both sides. And I remember Mei Li carrying somebody's child under one arm and fighting with the other. And I remember Lian Yu's blue-silver grass wrapping a rider's throat and taking him off his horse, weed spirit and all. And we came around the corner into the chief's yard where the chickens were, and my grandfather's house was burning. Elder Giles was in the doorway. He'd been holding the doorway. That's what it looked like from the yard, and that's what it was, an old man with a walking stick in a doorway, buying time for 4 people who'd gone out the back, and he'd bought it, and then somebody had put a blade into him under the ribs and left him there because he wasn't worth a second one. I got to him. I don't remember crossing the yard. He was still going. He was 72 and gutted, and he was still trying to talk, and his hands kept moving like they were looking for something to hold on to. I put the zither on the ground. I didn't have it. I had 100 cubic meters of pocket space, and I had put a guqin in it 11 months earlier for no reason at all. And I pulled it out into the dirt of a burning yard, and I played Forget Sorrow's Melody with my hands shaking so badly the first 4 notes were wrong. It caught him. It held. His heart went down to 1 beat every 28 seconds, and it stayed there, and it stopped being a death and started being a pause, and that is all the melody could do. It could not close what was open in him. It could only refuse to let go. So I sat in the dirt, playing a zither over my grandfather, while 100 armored men came into that yard. Lian Yu, I've got the gate. Mei Li, the wall. I've got it. They held that yard for me for 4 minutes, 2 children, against 100 professionals, on burning ground, so that the notes wouldn't stop. And then I let the notes stop, because I had to. I stood up out of the dirt, and I opened the furnace door in my chest all the way. Flame demon body. 10 meters of standing fire in a village yard, and everything wooden within 30 feet went up at once, and I brought one hand down on the mass of them in the gateway and killed 20 men with a palm. The rest tried to back out through the alley. I put my hand on the ground and split the road, and a wall of blue-white fire came up out of the cut and ran the length of the street, and that was the end of the alley and everyone in it. I want to tell you it felt good. It felt like nothing. It felt like being 10 meters tall and made of something that doesn't have opinions. I stood in the middle of my burning village at that height, 2 small friends below me, 1 old man on a doorstep with a heartbeat every 28 seconds, and the only thought I had was that there weren't enough of them left to make this worth anything. Which was when the leader arrived. He came in over the roofs, which was a real entrance, I'll give him that. Big man, bare-chested, hair down his back, and then the hair came alive. Spiky hedgehog. Spirit elder, past 30, 3 rings. Every hair on his head a blade, and the blades extend, and they change color when he loads them, and the third one dumps something into the wounds that makes you want to keep bleeding. He looked up at 10 meters of fire and grinned. There you are, he said. The village boy. They said fire. They said don't take the fire on directly. He didn't. He went sideways, hair like a net, all around the yard at once, and he took the fire out of me by the simple method of not being where it was, and then he put 4 blades through my flame body's core, which is a thing I did not know was possible. I came down out of the flame demon body onto my knees on the road. He pinned all 4 of us in about 6 seconds. Me, Lian Yu, Mei Li, and my grandfather, hair through our shoulders and our legs, up off the ground, hanging there like meat on hooks in the middle of the street. Then he walked over to me, casual, so we could have a chat. Your old man, he said, conversationally. The one on the step, that was me. Went in under the ribs, angled up. Not deep, mind you. Didn't want to waste the effort. He watched my face while he said it. That was the whole point of saying it. And now, he said, and turned to look at Mei Li, hanging 6 feet away with a blade through her shoulder, 10 years old. Let's have the little one down, in front of you, since we've got a minute. He reached for her. There's a thing that happens in a person at a certain point. It isn't rage. Rage is loud. This was the opposite of loud. Everything in me went very cold and very simple, and out of the whole enormous junk drawer of a life I'd half forgotten, one voice came up, green jumpsuit and all, screaming about the springtime of youth. The 8 gates, gate of opening, open, bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Kaito Ren. And then, because my mouth did not stop, because I said the second half of it, because the man was still reaching for her. The inner lotus, bloom, bite. 2 prizes, 2 spins, back to back. The 8 gates, the inner lotus. I want to explain what the 8 gates actually is, because the name makes it sound decorative. Your body has limiters, 8 of them. They exist because a human being who used 100% of their own muscle would tear themselves off their own bones. The 8 gates is a technique for opening those limiters one at a time, and every gate you open buys you a step up the ladder and charges you for it in years off the end of your life. I opened 6. 6 gates at 12 years old with a level 15 spirit power, standing on a hook in a burning street. My hair went white. Every hair on my head, from the root, in about a second. That's the price, and it's cheap at the price. Steam came off my skin. The hooks came out of my shoulders because the hooks were no longer strong enough to be in me, and I hit the ground on my feet at spirit elder strength, which is to say, at his. He got one word out. I went past him, took Mei Li off the blades, put her down behind me, and turned around, and I was already burning. Flame demon body and inner lotus at the same time, on 6 gates. I don't recommend it. It is the physical equivalent of setting fire to your own house to heat the room. He put every blade he had into me, all of it, the full net, the whole spirit avatar, and it went into a body running at a temperature that made steel a suggestion. Wrath of Ragnaros. 500 meters, that's the radius. Everything in 500 meters of me stopped existing in a specific order. First the man, then the street, then the fields, then the fence line, then the tree line on the low hill, and the fire went up in a column you could see from Nuading City. And people in Nuading City did see it, and they wrote about it. His last words came through the fire. Not to me. This isn't what we agreed on. You sold me out. I heard it. I filed it. I was 18 seconds from unconsciousness, and I filed it anyway. Because that sentence has 2 people in it, and I had only ever been counting 1. There were people on the hill. I found this out later from a shepherd who'd been up in the rocks and had the sense to stay there. He said that while Saint Spirit Village burned, 4 people stood on the ridge and watched it, unhurried, the way you'd watch weather. One of them was in white robes, and he was smiling. One of them was a beautiful boy in gold, very young, very still, and the shepherd noticed one thing about him and could not stop noticing it, and mentioned it to me twice. He had no Adam's apple. I filed that too. I filed everything that year, and understood almost none of it. Here's what was actually happening on that hill, which took me 4 years to assemble. Bishop Valerius had not hired the Blackwater mercenary group. That's the elegant part. The Blackwater group was already a front, quietly owned by an elder of the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile School, which is one of the 7 great sects, and about as far from the Spirit Hall as you can get on paper. So when somebody eventually went looking for who burned Saint Spirit Village, and somebody did, The trail ran straight into a rival sect's pocket and stopped there, perfectly, like it had been designed to. It had been designed to. And the reason for all of it was step one of a two-step plan. And step one was, take everything from the boy so he has nowhere to go. Step two, which went out as an instruction that same week, was, every academy on the continent quietly refuses him. That was it. That was the whole thing. A man offered me 500 gold a month. I said no thank you, and he burned a village of 400 people to reduce my options. I have been asked, since, whether I think he expected me to break. I think he expected me to arrive at his door. The 8 gates bill came due about 90 seconds after the fire went out. I've never found words for it that don't sound theatrical. The best I can do is this. Opening 6 gates feels like power, and closing 6 gates feels like every muscle you own trying to leave the building at once, from the inside. I lay in the ash with my hair white and my hands curled up, and I could not make my own fingers open for about 20 minutes. Lian Yu dug my grandfather out from under a fallen beam. Mei Li carried the zither because I'd told her to, twice, in a voice she said was frightening. The 4 of us walked out of St. Spirit Village at about noon. I looked back once. There was nothing to look at. That's not poetry. The wrath of Deathwing had taken 500 meters of everything, and what the fire hadn't taken, the riders had, and there was a shape where the well had been. Aunt Lu lived. Her baby lived, and about 90 others, the ones who got out through the fields while 3 children held a street. I have that number from the census the Empire ran 2 years later, and I have read it more times than I'd like to admit. 90 out of 400. They put us in a hospital in Nuoding City. Elder Giles in one room, unconscious, alive, being repaired by a rotating cast of very expensive people. Me in another, on my back, with white hair. Mei Li came in the second morning with a bowl of apples and started cutting one into pieces without asking me if I wanted it. You're going gray. I'm going white. It's different. You're 12. I'm aware. She fed me a piece of apple, which I did not want, and I ate it, because there was no version of that moment where I said no. She kept going. She got about a third of the way through the bowl before she said anything else. Brother. Can I call you that? Actually? Not as a joke? Yeah, I said. Yeah, okay. And that's when Thomas came in. I have to hand it to the Spirit Hall. The timing was immaculate. Not the day of the fire, that would have been crude. 2 days after, when the shock had gone and the arithmetic had started. He had a folder. On behalf of the Spirit Hall, he said, I'd like to extend our deepest sympathies and our support. The treatment here is covered, all of it, including the chiefs, for as long as it takes. There's housing arranged in New Ding for the 3 of you. Tuition at Nottingham is waived going forward. He turned a page. And we've found a position for the old gentleman when he's well. Groundskeeper at one of our facilities. Light work, good pay, housing attached. He closed the folder and smiled at me with real warmth and delivered the line he'd come to deliver. If you want to thank someone, said Thomas, thank the Spirit Hall. I looked at him for a while. Thank you, I said. He left very pleased. Mei Li said, Brother, your hand. I'd put a crack in the bed frame. I hadn't noticed. Here's the thing I want you to sit with. At that exact moment, I did not know. I had a dying man's shout in my head, this isn't what we agreed on, and a smiling bishop with a broken vase, and a mercenary group that traced to a rival sect, and I could not make the pieces meet. I spent 2 years genuinely unsure, and in the meantime, I took the housing. I took the tuition. I took the job for my grandfather, and I said thank you every time, and I smiled. Because if you're going to burn a man's house down, you should be very sure he isn't the patient type. A year later, I was in the spirit hunting forest again, alone, and a map vendor sold me. That's a real profession, by the way. Men who sit at the tree line with hand-drawn maps of beast territories and charge you 2 silver. Most of them are honest. This one looked at my hand while I was paying. The Nethersea ring, 100 cubic meters, on a 13-year-old, in a forest. He drew a sunflower on the corner of my map in yellow chalk, which I noticed and thought nothing of, and by nightfall there were 7 men in robes standing in a half-circle around my tent. The 7 hyenas, 7 spirit grandmasters, which 4 years earlier would have been the end of the story. The first one came in through the tent flap, and I put the mysterious blade through the canvas and threw him before he'd finished ducking, because I had been sleeping with it in my hand for a year, since the fire, and I have never stopped. Then it was 6, and they were awake, and they were good. I want to be specific about what good means here, because 7 robed men sounds like a crowd, and it was not a crowd. They had a formation, and they had rehearsed it. 2 on the flanks with reach weapons whose entire job was to make sure I never went sideways. 2 in front who traded with me and did not commit. 1 behind, moving constantly, doing nothing at all except waiting for the moment I turned my back on a specific angle. And one of them never came into the firelight at all. I never saw his face, and I never learned what his spirit was. They opened by burning my tent, which was clever, because it took away the only object in that clearing I could put between me and anything. Then they took 40 minutes to close the circle by 1 meter. 40 minutes. That is what professionals look like. There was no shouting. Nobody made a speech. 6 men in robes moved in a slow, patient contraction around a 13-year-old and cut him whenever he tested a wall, and the wall was always where he tested it. I got one of them. The one in front of me went down to a feint I'd been building for half an hour, and the flanker who overcommitted to punish it kept his arm by about 2 inches, and that made it worse, because now they stopped being patient. I want to be honest, I was going to lose that one. Not immediately, and not cleanly, but 6 coordinated grandmasters in the dark, with a plan, was more than a level 19 with 2 rings could grind through, and I knew it about 40 seconds in. So I reached for something big. I am the Black Emperor, I said, to a forest, with blood in my mouth. The heavens are shrouded, and I have walked out from under them. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from the Black Emperor. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize. 1%, said the shot bell in my skull, and the wheel stopped on him. A dog came out of the air about 4 feet off the ground and stayed there. Black. Not large. Sort of a mid-sized, disreputable-looking black dog, floating, with a 3rd eye in its forehead that was closed, and it took 1 look around the clearing at 6 armed men and the vendor cowering behind a tree. Then it barked. I don't know how to describe what happened to the 5 men and the vendor. I've tried. The closest I can get is that the sound arrived, and afterward there were 6 separations, very neat, all at approximately neck height, and the trees behind them had a horizontal line through them for about 90 meters. The dog landed on my chest and sat down on it. Right, it said. Let's talk about your situation. I want to note that I had, at this point, been fully prepared for a spirit ring. You can't hold me, said the Black Emperor. Don't take it personally. You couldn't hold a 1/10 of me. Your little system knows it too, which is why it's been pretending to be busy for the last 4 seconds. So you're leaving? I'm bored, he said, and you're funny. Here. He gave me a ring, a white one, 10 years old, the lowest, cheapest, most worthless class of spirit ring there is, the kind you get off a rabbit, and it came with no ability attached at all. An empty slot, delivered by a creature that had just decapitated 7 people with a noise. That's my 2nd ring, I said. That's my 10,000-year 2nd ring slot. You're putting a rabbit in it. I'm putting a placeholder in it. The 3rd eye opened halfway, which was the worst thing I have ever seen. Earn my approval, and I'll upgrade it. Bore me, and you'll be the man with the rabbit forever. There'll be tests. How many tests? Yes, said the Black Emperor, and went to sleep on my chest. 4 years. I'm going to move fast, because nothing in those 4 years is a story, and everything in them is the reason the rest of this works. I grew. That's the headline. At 16, 12 by this world's counting, and I was tall for it, 1.80 meters and still climbing, I was a level 25 Spirit Sage Master with 2 rings, 1 black and 1 embarrassing. I trained every day, and Elder Giles was alive and worked as a groundskeeper for the people who had done it, and I visited him twice a month and never once said a word about it, because he'd have gone and told them to their faces, and they'd have killed him for it. The Black Emperor gave me his 2nd test somewhere in year 2, and I'll tell you what it was later, because the moment I tell you now, you'll see the ending coming. And I visited my grandfather twice a month. I want to give that its own paragraph, because it's the hardest thing in those 4 years, and nobody ever asks about it. The Spirit Hall put him on the grounds of their district facility outside Nuoding. Groundskeeper. He had a cottage with a stove in it, and a set of shears, and about 4 acres of hedge, and he was 76, and he loved it. He genuinely loved it. He'd walk me around the beds and tell me what he'd moved and why the roses on the north side were a lost cause, and he'd complain about a gardener named Joe who watered wrong. And behind him, over the hedge, was a white building with the Spirit Hall's mark on the gate. Every single visit. 2 years. I sat in a cottage that they paid for, and ate food that they paid for, and listened to an old man be happy for the first time since the fire, and I said nothing. Once, in the 2nd winter, he caught me looking at the building. They've been good to us, he said. Wei Lin. I heard you. He put his cup down. My grandfather ran a village for 40 years, and he did not get to do that by being slow. If you know something, he said, and you're saving it, then save it properly. Don't let it show on your face at my table. That's the closest either of us ever came to saying it out loud. And I spent 4 years failing to get into a school. That's the part that grinds. I went to Suotua City at 12 with a black first ring, twin spirits, innate full spirit power, and a spirit hall registration page that made clerks stand up. Every advanced academy in that city turned me down at the door. Politely. Immediately. Some of them before I'd finished talking. I'll give you one so you understand the shape of it. The third one was Blue Tyrant. Big place, good reputation, and the admissions master came out personally, which I mistook for a good sign for about 4 seconds. He read my certificate. He looked at my rings, one black, one embarrassing white. He looked at my age. Then he said, "No." "You haven't tested me." "No." "Sir, I'm 12 with a 10,000-year first ring. You can walk out into that yard and pick any student here and I'll, young man." And here's the thing, he was not enjoying it. That's what I remember. He looked like a man carrying something heavy across a room. "I'm not testing you, because if I test you, I'll want you, and I'm not going to be permitted to have you. So let's both save the afternoon." "Permitted by whom?" He shut the door. 7 academies in 9 days. On the 9th day, on a street corner, a very fine carriage happened to stop next to me. "Wei Lin!" Bishop Valerius leaned out, delighted, astonished, a man running into an old friend. "In Suotuo?" "What a coincidence." "Bishop, you look tired. Are you enrolling? How's it going?" "Badly." "Terrible." He shook his head. "Terrible. The provincial academies are so short-sighted." He let that sit for exactly the right length of time, and then produced an envelope from his sleeve with a card trick. "You know, the Spirit Hall runs an academy. Excellent one. I could have you enrolled by this afternoon." I looked at the envelope. It had been prepared. It had been prepared with my name on it, in a carriage, on the 9th day of 9. And on my shoulder, invisible to everyone but me, a floating black dog said, in the tone of a man watching a bad play, "This old man is rotten all the way through, you know." "I know," I said. "Do you? Because you're smiling at him." "I know." I turned the envelope down and thanked him warmly, and he drove off, and I stood on that corner for a long moment, putting one more brick into a wall I'd been building for 4 years without letting myself look at it. 7 academies, 1 week, on the 9th day. Nobody is that lucky. I found a room at the Rose Hotel, which is where I met a white tiger having a very loud argument. Ground floor, common room. 2 boys about my age squared off with tables knocked back and a crowd already forming. One of them was Lian Yu. I hadn't seen him in 8 months. He'd gotten taller and considerably more dangerous. And he was standing in a hotel common room with blue silvergrass out and his jaw set. The other one was a mountain of a young man with 2 spirit rings and gold in his eyes. "Huo Ming," he said when he'd knocked Lian Yu back over a table. "Remember it." White Tiger. Vajra transformation, 2nd ring, and at level 37 he was the strongest person under 20 I'd ever stood in a room with. I put my cup down. "Foolish little brother," I said. "You've been away a year, and you still start fights you can't finish." Lian Yu's head snapped around, and then he did something I did not expect, which was to grin. "He's yours," he said, from the floor. I softened him up. "You did not." I softened him up spiritually. Huo Ming looked between us. "Who are you?" "I'm his older brother," I said, by 3 seconds. "Now, before I tell you how this went, I want to flag something, because it's the most useful thing in the whole episode. That morning, on the road in, the wheel had given me a bodyguard. I'd quoted a general out of a story about a street full of demons, and the wheel had come up with the man himself, Zhang Liao, standing there in the dust in full armor with his hands folded, 1%, out of nowhere, and this one the system could keep. He didn't talk much. He stood behind me and radiated the specific calm of a person who has never in his life had to hurry. I mention it because Zhang Liao is standing at the back of the room for this entire fight, arms folded, and nobody in the story ever asks who he is. "Rings up," said Huo Ming, and the white tiger came out of him full. Vajratrat form, skin goes to armor, strength triples, and a level 37 spirit ancestor came across that common room at me like a landslide with opinions. Here's what he didn't know about my sword. 4 years, 40 bandits in a road cut, 20 men in a burning yard, 2 men in a forest, 6 hyenas. Every ghost wolf, every beast, every single thing that had ever died on the mysterious blade had made it sharper, permanently, no cap, and the system had been very clear that sharpness in this case was not a metaphor. The blade cut faster, my arm moved faster holding it. Somewhere in year 3, the accumulated stack passed 30% attack speed, and I stopped counting. He swung, I was not there. Understand what a white tiger Vajra transformation actually is, because I'm about to make it sound easy, and it was not. His skin becomes something between stone and metal, his strength triples. Every blow he lands is a cart accident, and he does not have to aim, because the space he occupies becomes a bad place for you to be standing. He hit a table on the follow-through, and the table stopped being furniture. He came back around with the reverse, which was faster, and I let that one pass close enough to move my hair, because I wanted to see the recovery. The Sharingan had it after one look, and after that I knew where his weight was going to be for the rest of his life. Then he did the smart thing, which was to stop swinging and start closing. Vajra doesn't need to swing, Vajra needs to arrive, so I stopped moving backward. I put 4 cuts into the white tiger barrier before he'd finished the step, and the barrier, which is a defensive ability that has genuinely never failed him, not once, not in his entire life, opened like paper. I want to be honest about why, and the answer is bookkeeping. He got his guard up, good instincts, too slow. Song of the Blue Lotus opened him from the left shoulder to the right kidney, one line, blue light hanging in the air behind it for a second afterward like a stroke of ink. He went down on one knee in a hotel common room, bleeding, staring at the floor, silence. Then Huo Ming started to laugh, which frankly I respect enormously. Right, he said, right, okay. He got up, holding himself together, and stuck out a bloody hand. Huo Ming, Wei Lin, I'm going to fight you again. Probably. No, I mean it, I'm going to. I heard you, I said, and shook his hand. Behind me, Zhang Liao unfolded his arms, having not been needed, and went to look for somewhere to sit. The Rose Hotel had one room left, and the room was called the Red Ocean. It was a honeymoon suite. It was upholstered in red. There was a heart on the ceiling. The 3 of us, me, Lian Yu, and Huo Ming, who had decided he lived with us now, stood in the doorway for a while and looked at it. There's one bed, said Lian Yu. There's a very large bed, said Huo Ming. We took it. It was the worst night's sleep of my life, and I have since been stabbed, and at about 3 in the morning, staring at a heart on a ceiling, I said something out loud that I have regretted and treasured in roughly equal measure ever since. I said, honestly, I'd take any job that comes with room and board. Bite! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Long May. There was a girl standing at the foot of the bed. I want to be clear that neither of the other 2 woke up. Not then. Huo Ming slept through the entire thing. She was maybe 18, in a delivery uniform, with an enormous flat cap and the calmest face I have ever seen on a living creature. She looked at me. She looked at the room. She looked at the heart on the ceiling. Where's the food? She said. Thick country accent. Absolutely no urgency of any kind. There isn't any. Then why did you call me? I didn't call you. I sat up. Who are you? Long May. She sat down on the end of the bed with her hands in her lap. I do deliveries. I want 3 meals a day, somewhere to sleep, and the full package. The what? 5 insurances, said Long May, and 1 housing fund. I did not know what that meant. I understood, on some level below language, that it was the funniest sentence I would ever hear. Done, I said. Good. She lay down across the foot of the bed like a cat and went to sleep in about 4 seconds, and that was how I acquired the most dangerous person on the continent for the price of dinner. I did not know that yet either. She looked like a girl who delivered things. She was very careful to look like a girl who delivered things. The next morning we went shopping, and I met the Walter problem. Walter's shop was a spirit tool shop 3 streets over, and it was run by a man in a red coat with round glasses and the soul of a market stall. He greeted us at the door, evaluated our clothing, and adjusted his prices upward in real time. There was a girl in there ahead of us, small, blonde, extremely well-dressed, and she was buying. She bought a support tool, a nice one, and I glanced at it as it came across the counter, and my whole body went cold. There was a mark on the base. A tattoo pattern worked into the metal. The same one. The same one those two men had worn on their faces in a carriage window 5 years earlier, on their way to a forest to ask my brother where I was. "Excuse me," I said. "Can I see that?" "No," said Zhu Qingshu. "It'll take 1 second. It's mine, I paid for it, and I don't know you." She wrapped it up and put it in her bag with the efficiency of a girl who has been asked for things her entire life. "Try being rich next time." And she left. I did not chase her. I want to be honest about why. Because chasing the daughter of somebody obviously enormous through a city street while asking about a tattoo is how you get killed by a family retainer. And because I already had a version of that answer I didn't like. Then Walter put his elbows on the counter and got to business. "That ring. It's not for sale. 20,000 gold coins." I laughed at him. He didn't blink. 100,000. I stopped laughing. 100,000 gold coins is not a number. It's a small town. It's the annual revenue of a noble house. A man in a shabby red coat in a middling shop in Suotuo City offered a stranger 100,000 gold coins for a ring over a counter without changing his expression. "No," I said. "Everything has a price, lad." "Sure," I said. "Not that." He looked at me with a completely new expression, and I did not understand what I was looking at until about a week later, when the same man in the same coat turned out to be running an academy. Shrek Academy took 7 students a year and had never once filled the class. That's not a boast, it's a policy. They didn't want the strongest. They wanted, in Walter's exact words, monsters. And the entrance exam was designed by a man who had clearly stopped caring about liability around the time he stopped caring about his coat. Test 1 was the gate. Zhou Luan stood in it, level 61 Spirit Emperor, standing in an academy doorway like a doorman, and he checked spirit rings. He looked at mine, and his face went odd. "That's a black ring." "Yes." "You're 12. I get that a lot." "First position, black." He said it slowly, mostly to himself. "In." "Go on." "In." Test 2 was a boy with a sausage. I need you to understand that I am reporting this accurately. There was a table in the entrance hall, and behind the table sat a cheerful young man in a food vendor's apron, and his spirit was a sausage. "Rufus," he said, "food system. Sit down, take one of these." "What is it?" "Recovery sausage." He held it out. "Eat it, and I write down whether you're an idiot." I ate it. Understand, I had a level 25 spirit power and a heavenly flame and a 5-year habit of assuming that everything handed to me by a stranger was an attempt on my life, and I ate a sausage produced from a boy's hand in an entrance hall because he was so completely unbothered that suspicion felt rude. Then a warm feeling went through my legs, and about 4 days of accumulated road exhaustion left my body. "Right," said Rufus, writing. "Not an idiot. Most people smell it first. 2 people this morning tried to fight me about it." He looked up. One of them was a girl in very expensive clothes, and I'd stay away from her. She's got a temper. That was my first piece of intelligence about Zhu Qingshu, and it was accurate. Test 3 was a fight, and my opponent was a broad, cheerful, unbearable young man called Sun Chang. His spirit was an evil fire phoenix, which is a genuinely excellent spirit, and he came out onto the sand in front of 40 applicants doing a little bow to each side of the yard. "Try not to feel bad," he told me. "I'm fire attribute. Nothing you've got will—" I slapped him, open hand, 1, on the fire-resistant Phoenix boy, from a person carrying the 19th heavenly flame in his left palm, and Sun Chang left his feet and did not come back down for about 6 meters. The yard made a noise. Then I felt bad, because he'd been friendly, and I sat down next to him on the sand and got the zither out of the ring and played Forget Sorrow's Melody for 90 seconds until he sat up. He looked at me, then at the instrument, then at his own hands. "Did you heal me?" "Yes." "After you hit me?" "Yes." "That's the rudest thing anyone's ever done to me," said Sun Chang, and then, immediately, "Are you doing anything after this?" Walter's eyebrows went up so far they left his glasses behind, and I noticed him noticing, and I filed it. Test 4 was in the training field. Test 4 was a man who filled the doorway sideways. "Liu Xuan," he said, level 76, spirit saint, immovable king. "Any of you touch me, and you're in." Everybody laughed. Then he took 1 step, and the ground under him cracked, and nobody laughed again. I was going to sit that one out. That's the truth. I had 2 rings and a level 25 spirit power, and I had nothing to prove to a wall. And the Black Emperor woke up on my shoulder. Ah, he said. Test 1. What? You wanted to know how many tests? This is test 1. The third eye opened lazily. Survive him. Alone. 1 incense stick. Not beat him. I'm not cruel. Survive. He's a spirit saint. Yes, said the dog, and you're boring. So I walked out onto that field alone, in front of 40 applicants and 1 man in a red coat, and Liu Xuan looked down at me with genuine kindness, which was somehow worse. Son, he said, go and sit down. 1 incense stick, I said. What? Light it. They lit it. I opened with sword chi like lotus. That's Blue Lotus level 3, and I'd gotten it in year 3, and here is what it does. Instead of 1 blade of chi, you fold 9 of them into the same stroke, stacked, each one riding the one before it. It looks like a single cut. It arrives like 9. I put it into the immovable king's chest, and it moved him about 4 inches, and 4 inches is more than anyone had moved Liu Xuan in 11 years. The field went very quiet. Huh, said Liu Xuan, and stopped being kind. Gravity amplification. Suddenly I weighed 6 times what I weighed, and the field cracked under my knees, and he walked toward me through his own ability like it was weather he'd dressed for. I went flame demon body at 20 meters, which I had never done indoors or near anyone I liked. 10 meters of standing fire on a school training ground. The applicants ran. Walter did not run, which I noted. Liu Xuan hit me. Compression next, the third one, the ability that squeezes, and it squeezed my flame demon body down from 10 meters to 4, like a man closing a fist around a candle. Then Vajra roar, which is a sound, and the sound put me on my back with blood coming out of my ears. Half the incense left. So I opened the gate of opening. 1 gate, just the first. My hair went a shade paler, and my whole body came up off the ground on its own like a thrown thing, and I did not attack him, because attacking him was pointless. I hit him with Deathwing. Not the full wrath, I would have taken the academy with it. A directed one. Everything I had, focused down into a column about 2 meters across, into a level 76 spirit saint at a range of 6 feet. He blocked it. Of course he blocked it. He crossed his forearms and stood in it, and it broke around him like water around a rock, and when it cleared, he was still standing exactly where he'd been standing, and every single hair on his body was gone. Head, beard, eyebrows, arms. The most magnificent beard in the Sutuo province, and a level 25 spirit sage master took it off him with 1 attack and then fell over sideways. The incense went out. Nobody said anything for a very long time. Liu Xuan stood in the middle of a burned field, pink, smooth, and steaming gently. Then he said, Walter. Yes, take him. That night, the Black Emperor upgraded my rabbit. The white ring came off me and hung in the air over my chest and turned purple. 1,000 years, second position, and something with weight in it now, and the dog watched it settle with his head on one side like a man checking his own carpentry. Passable, he said. What's test 2? Test 2 is already finished, he yawned. You did it 4 years ago. I sat up, because I knew what he meant. Of course I knew what he meant. For 4 years, on and off, that dog had walked me to places. Old places. Tombs, mostly. Sealed sect grounds, ancestral grounds, the burial hills of families that had been on this continent for 600 years, and he'd point at the ground and say, dig, and I'd dig, and I'd come out with spirit bones and heirlooms, and, once, a sword that screamed. I had spent 4 years robbing the graves of the most powerful families on the continent, at the direction of a floating dog, because he made me strong, and because I was 13, and because nobody caught us. Test 2, said the Black Emperor comfortably, was making enemies. Test 3 is surviving them. How many enemies? Oh, most of them, he said. Go to sleep. I did not go to sleep. I want to plant that here and leave it, because it is going to come back and cost me more than anything else in this story, and at the time, it was a dog on a windowsill being pleased with himself. There was one more prize that night, and it was the only good news I got all week. I quoted a lunatic with a fan out of a story about a man who founded a sect out of spite, and the wheel gave me a charter, the Exploding Heaven Gang, a founding token, a real one, legally recognized in a way I never fully understood, the kind of document that turns a person into an organization. With that in my pocket, I could found my own sect on this continent tomorrow. All I needed was land, money, and members. I had none of those things. Yet. Shrek Academy took 7 students that year, which had never happened, and Walter put all 7 of us in the same corridor, and then took us out to dinner in the village below the hill to celebrate. It was not a celebration. It was a briefing with rice in it. You are not talented, said Walter over the second dish. Some of you think you are. You're not. There are 40,000 talented young spirit masters on this continent, and every one of them is going to lose to somebody. What I want is monsters, and monsters are made by putting talent somewhere it can't breathe. That's very inspiring, said Rufus. Eat your dinner. Sun Chang was not eating his dinner. Sun Chang had been staring into a cup for 20 minutes, and eventually the whole table gave up and asked. Her name was Cui Hua. She'd been a girl from his hometown, and she'd written to him, and the letter was 3 lines long, and one of them was about a merchant's son. Read it out, said Hua Ming. No. Read it out, it'll help. He read it out. It did not help. It was so brutally, casually short that the whole table sat there in silence afterward, and then Sun Chang put his face in his hands and said, She spelled my name wrong. Jun Hong. She spelled my name wrong. We were together for 2 years. We got him drunk. It was a group decision, arrived at without discussion, and it was the correct call, and by the end of the night, he was standing on a bench in a village restaurant, delivering a speech about the Phoenix's fidelity to an audience of confused farmers. And on the walk back up the hill, 3 older students from the year above were waiting on the path, because Shrek seniors had heard that the new intake included a 12-year-old with a black ring who had taken the eyebrows off Liu Xuen. They wanted to establish the hierarchy. It's traditional. Freshman, said the biggest one, there's a rule here. First years call second years grandpa. That's not a rule, said Rufus. It is now. I looked at 3 17-year-olds on a dark path, and then at Sun Chang, who was crying about a letter, and I decided the evening had earned some structure. It took 11 seconds, and I did not use a single ability. Afterward, the 3 of them sat on the path in a row holding various parts of themselves, and I crouched down in front of the biggest one. Say it, I said. Grandfather. Louder. Sun Chang stopped crying long enough to laugh so hard he fell into a hedge, and I've always felt that was the real medicine. 2 things happened in my first fortnight after that which actually matter. The first is that I moved Long Mei into my room. Nobody stopped me. I'd like to say that's because I'm intimidating. It's because Long Mei walked in carrying her own bedding, sat down, and radiated such total absence of doubt that 3 teachers separately decided she was somebody else's problem. The second thing happened on her 4th night, when she stood up in the middle of a sentence and said, There's a man outside. There's a lot of men outside. It's a school. He's been there since Tuesday. She put her cap on. I'm going to go and bury him. And she went out the window. I got to the tree line about 40 seconds behind her, which was 39 seconds too late, and what I found there rearranged my understanding of the world. Lian Kuang was standing in the clearing, Lian Yu's father, the village blacksmith, 9 spirit rings turning under his feet in colors I'd only read about, and the clear sky hammer in both hands, and the pressure coming off him bending the grass flat in a circle 40 meters wide. A titled Douluo, top 50 on the continent. Hiding in my village for 11 years, shoeing horses. And in front of him, a girl in a delivery cap was standing with her hands behind her back, looking bored. He swung. I have seen a lot of things hit a lot of other things. The clear sky hammer coming down is still the loudest single event of my life. It put a crater in that clearing you could have kept fish in. Long Mei was not in the crater. She was 6 inches to the left of it, in exactly the same posture, having moved without appearing to move at any point. He swung 11 more times. I counted. I was lying flat in the tree line with my chin in the dirt, and I counted 11. And I want to describe what they looked like, because it is the single most educational 4 minutes of my life. The first 3 were tests. Big, slow, obvious, and she moved about 4 inches for each one. Then he started using the rings. The 4th swing came with something on it that made the air heavy, and the ground under the arc turned to powder in a fan shape 30 meters long. She was not in the fan. The 5th came in low, at knee height, the kind of strike you use on someone who has been dodging upward, and she stepped over it like a woman stepping over a puddle while thinking about something else. By the 8th, he had stopped being a legend and started being a man having a problem. And the whole time, this is the part, her hands never came out of her sleeves. On the 12th, she stopped dodging and let it hit her. Straight down, full strength, a 9-ring titled Douluo's signature weapon into a girl's raised forearm. The ground dropped a meter. She did not. "You're loud," said Long Mei. Liu Xuan arrived at that moment at a dead run, having felt it from the academy, a level 76 spirit saint sprinting in to save a student, and Long Mei, without looking, put a hand out and moved him, swatted him. Off his feet, 20 meters, into a tree. Then she looked back at Lian Kuang and tilted her head, and for the first time that night, the man with 9 rings took a step backward. Walter arrived. Walter took one look at the clearing, at the crater, at his bald spirit saint sitting in a tree, and at a girl in a delivery uniform, and did the smartest thing anybody did that entire night. He turned around and went back inside. I went out to that clearing an hour later in a black robe and a red demon mask. I bought both in a market in Suotuo for 11 silver. I want that on the record because of how the next 4 minutes went. Lian Kuang was still there, sitting on a rock in his own crater, doing the thing men do after a fight they didn't win and didn't lose. He looked up at a figure in black with a devil's face on it and did not reach for his hammer, which told me everything about how his evening had gone. "Who are you?" "I am the leader of the Exploding Heaven Gang," I said. I had invented the Exploding Heaven Gang 11 minutes earlier, on a walk, out of a piece of paper from a lottery wheel. "Never heard of it." "You've never heard of most things." I let that sit. "You're Lian Kuang, Clear Sky Hammer. You were the strongest man on this continent 19 years ago, and now you shoe horses because your wife was a 100,000-year spirit beast in human form, and the spirit hall found out, and they killed her while she was pregnant, and you have spent every year since deciding you can't win." He came up off the rock. The hammer came with him. 9 rings lit under his feet, and the whole clearing went cold, and I stood there in a market stall mask with a level 25 spirit power and did not move, because moving would have ended the negotiation. "Say her name again," said Lian Kuang. "Bai Qing," I said, "and you can kill me for it, and then you'll go back to the forge, and in 30 years, your son will do this alone." He stood there for a long time. "What do you want?" "Members," I spread my hands. "I have a charter, a plan, and no people. I'm building something that can hurt the spirit hall, and I'm not doing it in 50 years. I'm doing it in 10. "With what?" "With this." And I gave him the actual offer, the only one that could have worked on that man. Not power, he'd had power, and it hadn't saved her. A cultivation method that has nothing to do with spirits. No awakening, no rings, no hall, no registration, no certificate. Anyone can learn it. A farmer can learn it. Every single person the spirit hall has been sorting into garbage for 600 years, we teach them to be dangerous instead. I'd gotten it out of Long Mei, incidentally. She'd been teaching me for 2 weeks, mostly by saying, "No, wrong," while eating. Lian Kuang lowered the hammer. "Your name." "Code name," I said. "You'll be number 3. There are 10 senior members, and you'd rank 9th of them by strength." That was a lie. There were 0 senior members. He was the first person I had ever spoken to about it, and I told a 9-ring titled Douluo that he ranked 9th out of 10 in an organization that did not exist, and he believed me, because a man who wants very badly to hope will do most of the work himself. "I need to think," said Lian Kuang. "Take a week." He took 4 days. Bishop Valerius received a report that same week, and the report said, "The boy has enrolled at Shrek Academy, not a spirit hall school, not his school. A 3-story building with 40 students, run by a man in a red coat that had refused spirit hall money twice." He put his hand through a table. "I have the account of that afternoon from a man who was in the room, and I have paid a great deal for it over the years, and it is worth every coin." Valerius did not shout. He sat down, and he had the table replaced, and then he laid out the problem to 2 subordinates, the way an engineer lays out a bridge that has failed. Attempt 1, he said, was the offer, refused. Attempt 2 was the pressure, the academies, the physician, the price on a boy's spine, refused, and worse, absorbed. Attempt 3 was the village, and the village had been the correct move, and it had failed for a reason that genuinely bothered him. "He didn't come to me," Valerius said. "That's the sentence. That's the whole thing. He'd taken 400 people off the map to close every door except his, and the boy had walked past his door for 4 years, smiling, saying thank you." "So he's not frightened," said one of the subordinates. "He's not frightened," Valerius agreed. "So we stop attempting to acquire him." Then he picked a place to have me killed, and he picked it carefully, because he was a careful man. Not in the academy. Walter had a spirit saint, and Walter himself was an unknown quantity that Valerius's file had 3 separate warnings on. Not on the road, too obvious after the last one. 2 coincidences is a pattern, and a pattern gets read by the Heaven Do Empire, and the Heaven Do Empire was already looking for reasons. He picked the Great Spirit Arena in Suotuo City, where people go to fight, where boys die every month by accident, where the whole city can watch it happen and applaud and call it sport, and where no investigator on the continent would think twice about a 13-year-old who signed a form and lost. He was, I have to admit, entirely correct about the venue. Meanwhile, Walter had adopted me as a personal project, which was worse than being hunted. Your problem, he said on day 3, is that you're a firework. I'm what? A firework. Enormous, expensive, over in 9 seconds. He walked around me with his hands behind his back. That fire of yours, what's the longest you've held it at full output? About 40 seconds. And then I fall over. There it is. He handed me a stone cup. Melt this. I burned the cup into slag in a quarter of a second. Wrong, said Walter, delighted, and handed me another one. Heat it, don't melt it. Get it hot enough to boil water, and hold it there for 10 minutes. I spent 2 weeks on the stone cup, then glass. Glass took a month because glass tells on you. 1 flicker and it cracks, and you have to start again. And I broke 71 glass cups, and the Academy's supply budget became a topic at a staff meeting. Then wood, then paper. I want to be clear about how humiliating this training is. I had leveled a village. I had taken the eyebrows off a spirit saint, and I spent my evenings in a storeroom holding a heavenly flame against a sheet of paper, trying to make it warm without making it a memory. By the end of it, I could run the green lotus core flame for 6 minutes at full output instead of 40 seconds. 9 times. He got me 9 times more fuel with a cup, and I have never once told him he was right about anything, and he knows. Then he ran us to Suotuo City. At night. 50 kilometers, on foot, as a group, with Liu Xuen jogging alongside making conversation. At the gates of the Great Spirit Arena, he stopped and told us the actual assignment. You fight here, all of you, under aliases. He adjusted his glasses. And you don't lose. Not once. A perfect record, all the way up from the beginner's pit to the main arena. Anyone who loses a match comes home and explains it to me personally. How long do we have? Until you're good, said Walter. The Great Spirit Arena is 3 rings deep. The beginner's pit at the bottom, where nobody dies on purpose. The middle arena, where the money is. And the main arena at the top, where the house takes bets and the fights are real and the crowd is 8,000 people who have paid to see something happen to somebody. My first match was in the pit against a level 29 Spirit Sage Master with a Hammer Spirit and 11 wins. I killed the match in 1 move. Not him, the match. Relentless charge off the line, sword chi like Lotus on arrival, and he was on his back with his spirit dispersed before the crowd had finished sitting down, under 2 seconds. Somebody in the 3rd row made a noise like they'd been robbed. Then the house did something interesting, which was to stop matching me with beginners. Week 2, they put me in against a man who did not belong in the pit. Level 34, 22 years old, a storm bear spirit, and he had been dropped a tier as a punishment for something the house did not explain. He came into that pit furious and looking for somebody small. He got about 9 seconds. I want to describe the 9 seconds because it's the first time I ever used the Gate of Babylon in front of a crowd. He charged, bear's charge. And I did not draw a weapon because I no longer owned a weapon in any sense a spectator would recognize. I simply opened my hand. And 11 golden ripples opened in the air around me, and 11 blades came halfway out of them and hung there, pointing at him. He stopped. You can hear 400 people breathe in at the same time in a stone pit, and it is one of my favorite sounds in the world. I threw 4, 2 into the sand in front of his feet, 1 past each ear. Then I walked up and put him down with the flat of a 5th one, and the pit lost its mind, and the house tripled the entry price for the following night. By week 3, the pit was full, which the pit never is. People were coming down from the middle arena to watch a masked 12-year-old finish fights before the ale got poured, and the house started putting me on last so people would stay. I fought under a false name the whole time because Walter insisted. It was a bad name. He picked it. I have never told anybody what it was, and I never will. The Argus thing happened in week 4, and it happened to Qin Yu. Chin Yu was one of ours. Quiet, precise, a hell civet spirit, one of the fastest people I have ever seen move, and a person who said perhaps 9 words a day. Her middle arena match was against a man called Argus, whose spirit was heavy water. He didn't beat her, that's the thing. He could have beaten her in 90 seconds. Instead, he took 11 minutes, and he used the water to hold her up in front of 8,000 people, and he made a show of it, the kind of show where the crowd starts to go quiet in a bad way. Then he pushed the water into her lungs and held her there, drowning, standing up, in the middle of a dry arena, and let the referee count. I was over the rail before I made a decision about it. Huo Ming got to her first because Huo Ming was closer, and he pulled her out of that thing with his bare hands. She wasn't breathing. I put the zither on the sand of the Great Spirit Arena in front of 8,000 people and played Forget Sorrow's melody, and Chin Yu came back somewhere in the second minute, and the arena did not make a sound the whole time. Afterward, in the tunnel, Huo Ming grabbed my collar with both hands. Kill him. Mu Bai. I'm asking. Formally. His hands were shaking, which I'd never seen. I owe you. Say the number. It's yours. Forever. Kill him. I was going to anyway, I said. I want to note that I was. And I want to note that he owed me, because that debt gets paid in about 8,000 words, and it changes everything. Deathmatch. That's a real category at the Great Spirit Arena. You sign for it, and the house takes a cut, and nobody investigates afterward. Argus signed happily. That should have told me something on its own. Mapped with water clones, which was fine. 6 of him, all moving, all solid enough to hit. Heavy water is a horrible spirit to fight, and I want to explain why, because on paper it looks like a joke. It isn't ice. It isn't a wave. It's water with the density turned up, and a clone made of it weighs about what a horse weighs and moves like a person, and when one of them puts a hand on your shoulder, your knee goes. I burned 4 of them in the first 10 seconds. The 5th one got a knife into my side, and I killed it, and the water fell on the sand and started walking back toward him in a thin sheet, because of course it did, because he wasn't spending anything. That's when I worked out he wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to keep me busy, because he was waiting to be paid for something. Then he took out 2 spirit tools. Now, spirit tools that size do not belong to a middle arena fighter. They don't belong to a middle arena fighter's whole family. He brought out 2 matched pieces called the Ice Blast Heaven Net, and the Ice Blast Heaven Net is auction house merchandise, the sort of thing that has a provenance and a buyer's name in a ledger somewhere. He put them on, and he became a 10-meter Komodo dragon made of ice. The arena floor froze from wall to wall. The air went white. 8,000 people saw their own breath at once. They said you were fire, said the thing, in a voice like a glacier moving. They said bring ice. They said. Not I thought. They said. I want you to hear how bad this fight was, because I nearly lost it. Green Lotus Core Flame against a 10-meter ice construct is a good matchup on paper and a terrible one in practice, because ice that size doesn't melt, it just becomes water, and water conducts a hit. He put me through the arena wall twice. He froze my right arm to the shoulder, and I had to burn my own arm to get it back, which I do not recommend. 6 minutes in, 6, exactly the number Valter's cups had bought me, I opened 3 gates. 3. Half of what I'd used in the village, and a fraction of the cost. I came in under his jaw at a speed the crowd could not follow, got both hands on the underside of that head, and drove it down into the frozen floor of the Great Spirit Arena hard enough to put the ice through the stone beneath it. Then I held him there and let him freeze. That's the part that got written up. The Fireboy didn't burn him. The Fireboy held the 10-meter ice dragon face down in its own cold until the cold finished the job the fire started, and the whole arena watched a thing that size stop moving over about 2.5 minutes. Before the end, I got down where the head was and asked him, quietly, who bought the tools. He knew. He absolutely knew. I could see it in the eye that was still working. He froze to death instead of telling me, which is not loyalty. Nobody is loyal to a paymaster at that temperature. That is a man who is more afraid of the answer than of dying, and there are perhaps 4 people on that continent capable of buying that kind of fear. I took the spirit tools off the corpse and put them in the Nethersea ring. They were the only physical object connecting anybody to anything, and I carried them around for a year, and I looked at them a lot. The wheel gave me something that night that changed the shape of my entire life, and it did it, as usual, at the worst possible moment. I was sitting on the edge of a bathhouse pool at 2 in the morning, exhausted, half-burned, and I said something offhand about how I had more weapons than I had hands. Bite! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from the Monarch of Valor, the Gate of Babylon. Golden ripples opened in the air over the water, and out of the first one came a sword I did not recognize, and it hung there, waiting to be thrown. And then the gate reached over and ate my first spirit. I felt it go. The mysterious blade, 4 years of kills, the no-cap sword, the thing I had slept holding since I was 12, came out of my hand on its own and went into the ripple and did not come back. I made a noise. Then the system, cheerful as a shop bell, explained the upgrade. The Gate of Babylon was my first spirit now. Not a sword, a treasury. Every weapon I had ever taken and every weapon I would ever take, stored, catalogued, deployable from any point in the air within 30 meters of me, all at once if I liked. And there was a second function, which I read 3 times. Any spirit master I kill whose spirit is a tool, the gate takes it, permanently, into the collection. I sat on the edge of a pool at 2 in the morning and understood that I had just become a person who gets stronger from funerals. There were 2 other prizes that night, small ones. The system threw them in like a shopkeeper adding a sweet to the bag. Leadership, grade A+, which explains a great deal about the next 2 years, and which I did not ask for. And beautiful young man, grade C. I did not notice that one until breakfast, when the entire dining hall went quiet as I walked in, and Zhu Qingshu dropped a spoon, and Lian Yu looked at my face for a long moment, and then looked at his own reflection in a teapot, and put the teapot down very carefully. What? I said. Nothing, said Lian Yu. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. I still think that's the funniest thing that has ever happened to me. The night after the Gate of Babylon, I got drunk for the first time in either of my lives. It was not planned. Long Mei came back to the room with a jar under her arm, sat down on the floor with her back against my bed, and poured 2 cups without asking whether I drank. You're sad, she said. I'm not sad. You've been holding your right hand funny all day, like there's supposed to be something in it. I looked at my right hand. 4 years. Every night. In a courtyard. In the dark. A black-bladed sword that got sharper every time somebody died on it, and I had slept with my fingers around that grip since the weak Saint Spirit village burned, and this morning a golden ripple had eaten it and given me a warehouse instead. It's a better spirit, I said. Objectively. It's an enormous upgrade. Said Long Mei, and pushed a cup at me. I drank it. Then I drank several more, at speed, because it turns out that a 12-year-old body with a heavenly flame in it processes rice wine like a barn processes a lantern. I don't remember most of the next 2 hours. I've been told about them. Apparently, I explained the entire Exploding Heaven Gang organizational structure to her, including all 10 senior members, of whom 2 existed. Apparently, I did an impression of Walter. Apparently, I cried, once, briefly, about a village, and then stopped and demanded more wine. What I do remember is waking up at some point with my head on her knee, and the room turning slowly, and her hand flat on my forehead, cool as river stone. Sleep, said Long Mei. I have training in 4 hours. No, you don't, she said. I moved it. You cannot move a training schedule at Shrek Academy. There is no mechanism. Liu Xuan simply did not come for me that morning, and never explained why, and looked at Long Mei at breakfast the way you look at weather coming over a hill. Zhu Qingshu arrived at Shrek 2 weeks later, and she arrived screaming. I should explain the situation. The blonde girl from the spirit tool shop, the one who wouldn't let me look at the tattoo, turned out to be Zhu Qingshu of the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile School, support spirit, 7 Treasures, the single most valuable class of teammate on the continent, and the daughter of the man who ran an entire great sect. She had never in her life carried her own bag. Walter put her on the same training schedule as the rest of us, which involved weights and running and a man with no eyebrows shouting. She refused. Then she cried. Then she went to Walter's office and informed him that her father would hear about it. I was outside the door. I heard all of it, and I heard Walter, who had accepted no money from her family and would not, say, in that flat, market stall voice, "Then he'll hear about it. Run your laps." She came out furious, and she came out past me, and I did the pettiest thing I have ever done in my life. I offered her a drink. It was cold tea. It was mostly cold tea. There was, in it, a small measure of a potion I had won off the wheel about a year earlier and had been carrying around ever since, waiting, the way you carry a firework. She drank the whole cup because she was thirsty and angry, and because nobody had ever handed her anything that wasn't good. Then she got about 9 steps down the corridor and stopped. I want to describe the sound she made. I can't. There isn't a word in either of my languages. What did you do? It's temporary, I said. What did you do? Ju Qingshu, heiress of the 7-treasure glazed tile school, stood in the corridor of Shrek Academy as a very well-dressed 13-year-old boy, patting her own chest with both hands in escalating horror. It wears off in about a month, I said. Probably. Probably. And in the meantime, you've still got laps. She did the laps. All of them. She ran them crying, in a boy's body, in the rain, and I ran them beside her the entire way with 200 pounds of iron on my back, and I did not say a single word for the whole hour, which I have always felt was the sportsmanlike thing to do. She has never forgiven me. She brings it up at every meal. Once, years later, in front of her father, at a state dinner. I would do it again immediately. The paper cup stopped burning in the 3rd week of that month. I want to mark it because it's the smallest event in this story and one of the 3 most important. I sat in a storeroom with a sheet of paper between my palms and a heavenly flame running at full output, and after 11 minutes the paper was warm and dry and had not so much as browned at the corners, and I stopped and put it down and sat there in the dark, feeling my own hands shake. 9 times the fuel. And the fire did what I told it now, down to a degree. I went and found Walter and said nothing about it, and he looked at my face and said, "Good," and went back to his ledger. 2 days later, we left for the Stardow Great Forest. The Stardow Great Forest is where you go for a real ring, and it is the single most dangerous place on the continent that isn't a war. Liu Xuan took 7 of us in. Me, Lian Yu, Mei Li, Huo Ming, Qin Yu, Rufus, Ju Qingshu, who was, mercifully for everybody, a girl again by then, having been restored by a bar of soap I do not intend to explain. Huo Ming set the marching order on the first morning, and he said it well. Himself at the front, Lian Yu and Mei Li on the flanks, Ju Qingshu and Rufus in the middle where the support belongs, Qin Yu loose as a scout, me at the back. Why the back? Because if something gets past all of us, said Huo Ming, I'd like it to meet you last. Fair. We stopped for the night in a town on the forest road called Lost Lamb, which is the same name as the inn Sagemaster carried me to when I was 11, and I am told there are 41 places on that continent called Lost Lamb, which says something about the continent. And in the common room of the Lost Lamb, 8 students in blue came through the door. Sanghui Academy, one of the big advanced academies, and every one of the 8 was older than us, and they came in loud in the specific way of people who have decided the room belongs to them. Their loudest one made a remark about Qin Yu. I want to be precise about what happened next, because there's a version going around where I did something impressive. I flicked a fireball at him, concentrated, about the size of a pea. 11 months of cup training, and the first practical application I ever found for the ability to make a heavenly flame very small and very precise was to put it directly into a stranger's crotch from across a common room. He went up like a haystack. Lian Yu tripped him on his way to the water barrel, which I maintain was gratuitous. And then the room came apart, and 8 Advanced Academy students and 7 Shrek students went through every table in that inn. They stopped it, actually. That's the funny part. Their teacher came down the stairs and stopped it, and then they restarted it in the yard by mutual agreement, and this time I stood up. 7 of them. Formation, ranks, the works. I opened with Dragon Piercing the Clouds. Understand what that ability had become. Zhao Yun's 3 thrusts, at 12 years old, on a body that had been carrying black ring pressure for 5 years, with the gate of Babylon feeding me a spear before my hand had finished asking for one. 7 thrusts a second. Not 3. 7. In a line, and the line moved across their front rank like somebody drawing a fence. All 7 of them were on the ground inside 4 seconds. Then I let my rings show. I hadn't up to that point. I stood in that yard and let the light come up under my feet, black, then purple. The yard of the Lost Lamb went entirely silent. A black first ring on a 12-year-old is a thing men tell their grandchildren about, and every single person present understood they had just picked a fight with something they had badly misjudged. Which is when the teacher came down into the yard. Li Jian, level 53 Spirit King, and his spirit was a black tortoise, which is to say, a wall with a temper. Children, he said, should be careful. Sir, said Liu Xuan from an upstairs window, in a voice I recognized as the beginning of something. But Li Jian had already stepped in, and I had already decided. He opened with Xuan Shui, ice, not honest cold like Argus's. This was a sealing ice, the kind that goes for the flame first and the man second, and it put out my left hand twice in the first 10 seconds. Nobody had ever put out the green lotus core flame. I went flame demon body at 20 meters. He hit me with his third ability, which compresses, and my 20 meters became 4 in about a second and a half, and I want you to know that being compressed while on fire is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. Fine, I opened 4 gates, gate of opening, gate of rest, gate of life, gate of injury. My hair went from white to something closer to bone, and steam came off my shoulders, and my spirit power climbed a whole rank in about 3 seconds. Spirit ancestor strength, at a spirit sage master's level, in a village yard. 20 punches a second, that's what 4 gates buys you, not a technique, just 20 punches a second into the front of a black tortoise shell, and I stood there and did it, and the shell rang like a bell being murdered, and around the 9th second, it cracked. He pulled his head in. That's the tortoise's whole answer. Head in, wait it out, come back out when the child is tired. I reached into the crack, got hold of a fistful of hair, and pulled his head back out of his own shell. I held a level 53 Spirit King up off the ground by the head in the yard of an inn. And Liu Xuan arrived, finally, and put one enormous hand on my shoulder and said, very quietly, "That'll do, son." Then he turned around and let his own pressure off the leash, and Li Jian, a spirit king, a teacher, a man with a reputation, went absolutely white because Liu Xuan at level 76 was standing in that yard telling him, without saying it, that this had been permitted rather than survived. The Canghui students left before dawn. Liu Xuan lectured me for an hour afterward about restraint, and the whole lecture was undermined by the fact that he kept laughing in the middle of it. While that was happening, somewhere else in that forest, a man in a mask was giving orders. I know this now. I did not know it then, and every part of the next 3 days was built on it. A dark commander of the Spirit Hall, Spirit King, with 30 men under him and an artifact called the Eye of Sand, was camped 4 kilometers inside the tree line with an instruction from Bishop Valerius that read, in effect, "Not by our hand." He had read that order about 9 times, and he did not like it. I know this because he complained about it out loud to a subordinate at a campfire 4 kilometers from where I was sleeping. 30 men in that forest, and one of them lived through the week. And the one who lived told the story afterward for the rest of his life in a series of increasingly cheap taverns. The Dark Commander's complaint was professional. He had 30 men and a Spirit King's authority, and the target was a 13-year-old with 3 rings, and he had been forbidden from walking over there and doing his job. "It's a boy," he said. "Bishop's orders. It's a boy with a school trip. I could take 4 men. He took a bishop's hospital," said the subordinate, off the list of buildings, which had not happened yet, and which the subordinate could not possibly have said, so I suspect the survivor improved that part in the retelling. I've kept it anyway, because it's the version I like. So the Dark Commander did as he was told. He was not there to kill me. That's the elegance of it again. The same elegance as the Blackwater group, the same fingerprints. He was there to hold up an artifact and make a forest angry. The Stardow Great Forest kills 11 people a year all by itself. Nobody investigates a forest. Nobody has ever once opened a file on a beast tide. He held the Eye of Sand up over his head at 4 in the morning and turned it on, and it did exactly what he had been promised it would do. And then, 3 days later, a woman called Meng Shu carried him into our camp by the back of the neck, and something that had been put inside him long before he ever entered that forest went off on schedule. It started on the 2nd morning, and it started with birds. Every bird in that section of forest came up off the canopy at once, and the sound of it was like a river changing its mind. Liu Xuan stopped walking. "Circle," he said. "Now." The ground came alive about 40 seconds later. I have tried to explain a beast tide to people who have not seen one. The closest I've got, imagine a stampede, and now imagine that every animal in it is capable of thought and hates you specifically. A golden poison quill eagle came in over the tree line first and marked us. It screamed once, and the pitch of everything under the canopy changed. Then the iron triangle held. That's what the crowd at Shrek called us afterward, and the name stuck, and I've never liked it, but it was accurate that day. Me on the point, Kuo Ming on the left, Lian Yu on the right, and Lian Yu's blue-silver grass, the weed, the ditch plant, the joke spirit, coming up out of the ground in a wall 40 meters wide and holding an entire flank on its own. A Stone Ridge ape came through the wall on my side. 1,000-year, 4 meters, arms like fallen trees. I put sword chi like lotus through its chest, 9 blades stacked in one stroke, and the ape came apart from collarbone to hip and did not finish falling before the next thing arrived. To my left, Mei Li and Qin Yu killed a lightning saber-toothed tiger together, and I only saw the last 2 seconds of it. Qin Yu under its jaw, Mei Li coming down out of a tree with both legs locked around its neck, and a crack like a door slamming in a small house. 10 minutes. That was all we lasted, and lasting 10 minutes was extraordinary, because by then there were hundreds, not dozens, hundreds, converging from 3 directions, on a forest floor, on 7 children and 1 bald spirit saint. "Retreat!" Liu Xuan roared. "Everybody, now, north, go!" And we ran. We ran for 11 hours, not in a straight line. You can't run in a straight line through the Stardow Great Forest. And even if you could, the tide moves faster than you do. So what you actually do is run in a series of terrible decisions. Liu Xuan carried Rufus for the last 3 hours. Rufus's spirit is a sausage. I want to be clear that I say this with love, because Rufus's sausages had kept 6 of us on our feet all afternoon, but the man himself could not run any more, and he had the good sense to stop pretending. Zhu Qingshu stopped at hour 9, just stopped, sat down on a root in the middle of a beast tide, and announced that she was finished. "Get up. I can't. Rongrong, I can't." And she was crying, and she was not being dramatic, which was the frightening part, because Zhu Qingshu was always at least a little bit dramatic, and this was not that. So I crouched down in front of her, in a forest, with something enormous crashing through the trees 200 meters back, and made a business offer. "If you get up," I said, "I'll never tell anyone about the month." She looked up. "About which month?" she said dangerously. "The month," I said, "when you were extremely handsome." Zhu Qingshu got up off that root and chased me for 4 kilometers, and that is how we cleared the last of the tide. We made camp at dusk in a hollow under a rock shelf, with Liu Xuan sitting at the mouth of it like a bald cliff. Everyone was past talking. So I pulled dinner out of my ring, 100 cubic meters. I had been carrying roast chicken, cured pork, 3 sacks of rice, salt, tea, and 11 jars of rice wine around the Stardow Great Forest for 4 days, in a pocket, and had not mentioned it, because nobody had asked, and because there is an art to timing. Kuo Ming made a sound like a man being stabbed. "You've had food?" "I've had a lot of food." "We ate bark." "You ate bark," I agreed, at your own suggestion, on day 2, as a group leadership exercise. We ate roast chicken under a rock in the middle of the deadliest forest on the continent, and Rufus cried a little into his, and it was, genuinely, one of the best nights of my life. Which is when the smell of it brought company. An old woman came out of the dark at the mouth of the hollow, with a girl behind her. Liu Xuan stood up so fast he hit his head on the rock shelf. "Gao Yuna," he said. "Bald," said the old woman, delighted. "You've gone bald." Grandma Serpent. Level 70-something Spirit Emperor, a legend in that forest, and she had walked into our camp because she had smelled chicken from a considerable distance and had strong feelings about it. Behind her, holding her sleeve, was her granddaughter Gao Ling, who was about 16, and looked at the food, and then at the floor, and then at the food. "Sit down," I said. "There's plenty." "There is now," said Grandma Serpent, and sat. The second tide came at 2 in the morning, and the second tide was different. The first one had been a stampede. This one was a hunt. 20 of them moving together, and every single one was 10,000 years old. 20 10,000-year beasts do not happen. That is not a natural event. That is the forest itself deciding on a policy, and it is the moment I stopped believing this was bad luck. Liu Xuan went out to meet them. Grandma Serpent went with him, and the 2 of them held the mouth of that hollow against the whole line, a spirit saint and a spirit emperor, side by side, and I watched the trees for 80 meters in every direction come down flat. They held everything except one. One got through the flank, low and fast, and it went for the softest thing in the camp, which was Zhu Qingshu, and past her, Mei Li had put herself in front with a weed and 2 fists. I was 30 meters away and behind a rock. There was a moon that night, enormous, white, 3/4 full, sitting in the gap the falling trees had made in the canopy, and I looked up at it and said the only line that fit. The moon is beautiful tonight, but you won't see the sunrise. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Celine. You have been awarded 2 chances to win a prize. 2. It gave me 2, back to back, and both of them came up, and both of them were hers. Dance of the Moon God and Crescent Assault. Here is what those 2 abilities do together, and it is the single most elegant thing the wheel ever handed me. The first one marks. You touch something with a crescent of moonlight, and it carries the mark. The second one lets you blink, instantly, no travel, no distance, to anything carrying a mark. Mark, blink, strike. Mark, blink, strike. And every strike lays a new mark on whatever it touches, which means that in a space full of enemies, you never stop moving. Ever. You become a thing that is not in any particular place. I marked the beast on Mei Li's line, and I was standing on its skull before the mark finished forming. Then I marked the next one, and I was there. Then the next. I went through a night forest under a white moon at a speed that had nothing to do with running, blinking crescent to crescent, and I cut a road from the rock shelf to the tree line through 6 10,000-year spirit beasts, and I came out the far side of it standing in front of Mei Li with the moonlight coming off me in strips. The tide broke about 90 seconds later, and when it was over and everybody was alive, I turned around to find 7 people staring at me. Not at the corpses, at my face. What? I said. Nothing, said Lian Yu tightly. Say it. You've gotten, said Zhu Qingshu, and stopped, and started again. The moonlight is doing something, and I hate it. Beautiful young man, grade C. Under a full moon. Covered in the blood of 6 10,000-year spirit beasts. I have never been able to explain to anybody why that particular combination was the thing that ruined Lian Yu's entire year. At breakfast, Grandma Serpent tried to marry me to her granddaughter, not delicately. She waited until my mouth was full, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "You, boy, you'll take Gao Ling." Gao Ling made a sound like a kettle. She's a good girl, strong, eats a lot, but so do you. I've watched you. She patted me. Settled. Ma'am, he's 12, said Liu Xuan from 4 feet away, with enormous urgency. So? So he's 12, Gao Yuna. We are not doing this in a cave. I have never been so grateful to a bald man in my life. The negotiation was still going when the 3rd guest arrived, and the 3rd guest changed the subject permanently. Dragon Master Gao Yang came into the camp carrying a man by the back of the neck. The man was a spirit king of the spirit hall, and he had an artifact on his belt called the Eye of Sand, and Meng Shu had found him 4 kilometers away at the exact center of everything that had happened to us for 3 days. He was steering it, said Meng Shu. The tide, both of them. Liu Xuan went across that camp very fast for a man his size. Who sent you? The Spirit King looked up at him, then he looked past him, at me, and something in his face rearranged, and he smiled with blood in his teeth. Black isn't necessarily black, he said, and died. Not killed, died, instantly, on his own, in a way that left no wound, the way a lamp goes out. Somebody had put something in that man a long time before he ever came into that forest, and it was keyed to a question. Liu Xuan held a corpse and swore for a full minute. I sat down on a rock and thought about a sentence. Black isn't necessarily black, which is a thing you say about a frame, which is a thing you say when the trail leads somewhere, and the somewhere is wrong on purpose, and you know it, and you are dying, and you have decided to be clever one last time. The Blackwater Mercenary Group traced to the 7-treasure glazed tile school. The Ice Blast Heaven Net traced to an auction house. And a man had just died rather than finish a sentence about it for the 2nd time in 6 months. I stopped believing in bad luck that morning on a rock at breakfast, and I have never gone back. 4 days later, I was standing in a clearing outside Shrek in a black robe and a red demon mask, and Lian Kuang came out of the trees and knelt. I want to say that I told him not to. I did not tell him not to. I stood there and let a 9-ring titled Douluo kneel to a 12-year-old in an 11-silver mask, because the moment I said get up, the whole architecture came down. Codename, I said. 3. 3. You rank 9th of the 10 seniors. You'll meet the others when it's useful. Yes. Then Long Mei came out of the trees with her hands in her sleeves, sat him down in the grass, and taught the strongest man on the continent how to breathe. That's what it looks like from outside. A girl in a delivery cap correcting a titled Douluo's posture with 2 fingers for about 40 minutes, saying no and wrong and eventually there. And Lian Kuang's cultivation, which had been stuck since his wife died 19 years earlier, moved. I watched a man's face when that happened. I'd been telling him a lie for 4 days, and in that moment the lie stopped mattering, because the method was real. The spirit hall killed Bai Qing, I said when it was over. I'm going to take it apart, not raid it. Take it apart, down to the foundations, and salt where it was. When? 10 years. Lian Kuang looked at his own hands for a while. Make it 8, he said. Which brings me to the cannon. I want to say up front, I did not plan the cannon. Nothing about the cannon was planned. It is the single most disproportionate thing I have ever done, and it took me under 4 minutes. It started because Lian Kuang asked what we actually had, and I had to admit that what we actually had was a charter, a lie, and 2 members. Then we should do something, he said, so people know there's a we. Which is good doctrine, honestly. So we went up a hill outside Suotuo City that night and looked down at the Spirit Primary Cathedral, the regional seat, the second largest spirit hall building in the province. Marble, gold, 400 years old, the place where every awakening certificate in 6 counties gets stamped. And I said, out loud, in the dark, in the voice of a very serious officer in a very ugly war, attack, attack, and if you can't win, attack anyway. Even if you lose, you make them remember it. Bite! Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Chen Geng. I would like you to appreciate that I was expecting a saber. The wheel spun, the wheel stopped, and the system said a series of words in a row that I did not understand. 800mm caliber, 1,350 tons, effective range 47 kilometers. Then the hill got heavier. It came out of the gate of Babylon in pieces because it would not fit through in one, and it assembled itself on the ridge over the course of about 90 seconds. And by the end of it, there was a railway gun on a hill outside Suotuo City, on rails, that it brought with it. Lian Kuang, a titled Douluo, walked all the way around it twice and did not speak. What is it? He said finally. It's a cannon. That's not a cannon. Cannons are... He made a shape with his hands, about the size of a barrel. It's a big cannon. I did not know how to fire it. I want to be honest. The system gave me the operating knowledge the same way it gave me the spear, and I stood there with a German gun crew's complete training in my head, in a mask, on a hill, and I turned a wheel. The Spirit Primary Cathedral of Suotuo City stopped existing at about 11 at night, not damaged. The shell arrived, and the marble went up in a column, and the column went up higher than the city wall, and there was a crater where 400 years of institution had been, and the sound rolled out over the plain and came back off the hills 9 seconds later. Windows broke in Suotuo City, all of them. Lian Kuang stood next to me with his mouth slightly open. We should have a motto, I said. What? An organization should have a motto. For the records, I looked at the crater. When the heavens explode, I said, nothing grows. Then I put the cannon back in my pocket, and we walked down the other side of the hill. The Spirit Hall's response took 4 days to arrive, and it came from the very top. In the Supreme Pontiff's palace, a woman I had never seen and had never heard of sat and listened to a report about a hole in the ground in Suotuo City. Hu Liayan, Supreme Pontiff of the Spirit Hall. The name Mei Li had set into my shoulder in the dark when she was 10 years old. The report she was given contained 3 facts, and one of them was wrong. Fact 1. The Spirit Primary Cathedral of Suotuo City had been destroyed at approximately 11 at night. Fact 2. There were no survivors from the building, and no witnesses within 2 kilometers. Fact 3, which was the wrong one. The attack had come from the direction of the Eastern Road. It had come from a hill 4 kilometers west, and the reason nobody worked that out for 2 years is that every single person in that investigation began from the assumption that whatever did it had to have been standing close enough to see the building. Nothing on that continent has a range of 4 kilometers. Nothing. The idea does not exist. There is no word for it in their military vocabulary, and so a room full of extremely intelligent people spent a week drawing circles that were all the wrong size. She sent Wraith Douluo, and in the meantime her investigators crawled over that crater for a week, and what they came back with was this. Fragments. Curved fragments of a metal nobody could identify, in a pattern that made no sense, in a crater with no spirit power residue in it at all. No spirit power. That's the part that broke them. Everything that happens on that continent leaves a residue because everything that happens on that continent is done by a spirit master, and a team of the Spirit Hall's best forensic minds stood in a hole and found the physical evidence of an event that had not involved a single drop of spirit power. Their official conclusion, which I have seen, was unknown ancient weapon, possibly divine, which is close enough that I've never argued with it. I got back to Shrek to find that Sage Master had arrived. Same gray robe, same tired face, same dark circles. He did not look surprised to see me, and I understood immediately that Walter had hired him, and that Walter had been planning to hire him since roughly the day he offered me 100,000 gold coins. You, said Sage Master. Me. Twin spirits, black ring in first position. He put his hands in his sleeves. I've spent 4 years telling myself I misread a certificate. You didn't. I know, he said. Am I qualified yet? Which is the single best insult anybody has ever landed on me, and I had it coming for 4 years, and I laughed out loud in that courtyard. That evening, the two of them made a bet. I want to state that neither of them consulted me. Walter and Sage Master sat down over a bottle in Walter's office, and by the bottom of it, they had wagered a year of meals on a proposition, and the proposition was 7 Shrek students, together, with preparation, versus Wei Lin, alone. Walter took me. Sage Master took the 7. He'll lose, said Sage Master. He will not. Walter, it's 7 against 1. I've taught 4 of them personally. Lian Yu alone has a year of meals, said Walter, and I want the good place, not the noodle stall. They gave the 7 of them 3 days to prepare, which was a mistake, because Lian Yu used all 3 of them. The format was capture the flag, 1 flag on a post in the middle of the training ground. 7 of them start at one end, I start at the other. If any one of them touches the flag, they win. If I stop all 7, I win. They had Zhu Qing Shu, which meant every one of them was running at a 30% buff before the whistle. They had Rufus, which meant unlimited stamina and mirror sausages. They had Huo Ming and Qin Yu, the 2 fastest heavy hitters in the academy. They had Mei Li, who is genuinely unfair. They had Sun Qiang, who by then had grown into something considerably scarier than a slap could handle. And they had Lian Yu, who had spent 3 days building a plan. The plan was excellent. I want to give it its due because it very nearly worked, and because Lian Yu has never once let me forget that it very nearly worked. The plan was, everybody attacks except 1. 6 of them come at me hard from 6 angles, all in, no reserve, and they don't try to win, they try to make me commit. And the 7th, Rufus, goes wide and slow around the outside of the entire field while I'm busy, and walks up to the flag from behind. It worked for 1 minute and 50 seconds. I opened 4 gates in the first 10 seconds, because there was no version of this where I didn't, and I put the inner lotus on top of it, which took me supersonic, and the training ground of Shrek Academy filled up with a sound like sheets tearing. 6 of them at once is a genuinely difficult problem even at that speed. Mei Li is fast enough to be where you are going. That's the whole horror of fighting her. She doesn't chase, she arrives, and twice in the first minute she was standing in the exact square of sand I had chosen half a second earlier, waiting, with her hands up. Xin Yu is fast enough to be there first. Different problem, same category of unpleasant. Huo Ming does not care what you hit him with, and he demonstrated this by taking a full green lotus palm on the forearm and continuing the sentence he'd been shouting. Sun Chang put a phoenix down the middle of that field that took the paint off the far wall and scorched one corner of the objective, which his own team spent the rest of the match not mentioning. And Zhu Qingshu stood behind all of it with all 7 of her treasures out, buffing every single one of them at once, which is the reason that fight lasted minutes instead of seconds. I had never fought a full-strength 7 treasure support before. It is like fighting 6 people who are each 30% someone else. And Lian Yu, the whole time, never engaged. He controlled. Blue silver grass under the sand, everywhere, all field, tightening a half second before I moved, and twice he had my ankle, and twice I had to spend something real to get it back. At 1 minute 50, I looked up, and Rufus was 9 meters from the flag. 9 meters, walking, grinning like an idiot. And there was no version of the ground between me and him that Lian Yu had not already covered, and I was on the wrong side of 5 people. So I said, to a sky I could not see because I was inside a dust cloud, the only thing that fit, take my light. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Kamen Rider Kuga. You have been awarded 1 chance to win a prize. 3rd ring, black, 10,000 years. 2nd black ring on a body that had no business holding the first one. And it went in the way the first one went in, which is to say, horribly. And I was on one knee in the sand for about a second and a half. Then I read what it did, and I started laughing. Flight. Not a jump, not a glide. Flight, unassisted, full three-dimensional flight, which on that continent belongs to spirit emperors at level 60 and above, and to absolutely nobody else. Lian Yu's entire plan was built on the ground. I went up. The field went silent. The actual physical silence of 40 spectators and 6 fighters all simultaneously losing track of where their problem had gone. And Rufus took his last 2 steps toward the flag with his hand out, and I came down out of the sky behind him and picked him up by the back of the collar. I lifted him about 4 meters and held him there. Rufus. Yeah. Do you want to be put down near the flag or in the pond? I feel, said Rufus, dangling, that this is a trick question. Sagemaster paid for a year of meals, at the good place. Walter ordered a starter he did not want, purely to make a point. And that evening, all 7 of them washed my feet, because that had been the terms which they had set themselves, out of confidence, in front of witnesses. Mei Li bit me. Twice. The good part came a week later, from Huo Ming, in the corridor, at 6 in the morning. He'd been gone for 9 days and hadn't told anybody where. The ice tools, he said. I stopped walking. The Ice Blast Heaven Net, from Argus. He had a piece of paper in his hand, and his eyes were red from not sleeping. You said you owed me nothing, and I said I owed you. So I went to Suotuo, and I went to the auction house, and I bribed a clerk with 4 months of my allowance, and there's a ledger, and there's a buyer. He gave me the paper. I looked at a name written in a clerk's neat hand, Bishop Valerius. Not an agent, not a shell company. The Spirit Hall's bishop of Suotuo City had personally purchased 2 high-grade spirit tools 11 days before a middle arena fighter had used them to try to kill me in a death match he had signed for cheerfully. I stood in a corridor at 6 in the morning and felt every single piece in 5 years of my life turn over at once and land facing the same direction. Because if he bought the tools, he bought Argus. And if he bought Argus, then a mercenary leader shouting, "This isn't what we agreed on," in a burning street was not shouting at a rival sect. And if that is true, then the man who came to my hospital bed with a folder and a job for my grandfather, and the man who stopped his carriage on the 9th day of 9, and the man who offered 500 gold a month and broke a vase on his way out, Wei Lin, said Huo Ming, "Your hand's on fire." I know, I said. I took Long Mei to Suotuo City, not Lian Yu, not Huo Ming. I want that noted because both of them asked, and because Lian Yu did not speak to me for a week afterward about it, and because the answer was that I did not intend to come back with a prisoner, and I did not want witnesses who would have opinions. Valerius was in a hospital. That was the intelligence. The bishop had been unwell for a month and was taking treatment in the Spirit Hall's own facility in the East Quarter, which was a fortress with beds in it. We staked it out from a tea house across the street for 2 days. On the second afternoon, 3 men decided to talk to Long Mei. I want to describe them accurately. There was a fat one called Pang De, there was a thin one called Ming, and there was an old one they called Elder Crane. And Elder Crane had a spirit tool and a spirit hall pin on his collar, which is the only reason any of what followed happened. They came over. They made the kind of remarks men make. Pang De put his hand on Long Mei's shoulder. I took his finger off at the second joint with a paring knife from the tea house table. Then Long Mei stood up, and I want to be clear that I did not need to be there for the next 11 seconds. She put Pang De through a wall, and she put Ming through the same wall, second, because the hole was already there. And Elder Crane ran. He got about 40 meters, and I opened the gate of Babylon. 9 golden ripples in the air over that street, and 9 weapons came out of them, and I did not throw them at him, I threw them around him. A fence, hip height, in a circle 6 feet across. He stopped. "Your spirit's a tool," I said, walking up. "Isn't it?" "Yes." "Good, then we can do this quickly." I crouched down at the edge of his little fence. "Bishop Valerius, which floor?" He told me about the guards first, which was a way of not answering. He told me about the Templars. He told me he was a very small person in a very large organization, and that he had a daughter, which may even have been true. Then he told me the floor. Then I killed him, and the gate of Babylon reached out and took his spirit. That's the second function. I'd read it at 2 in the morning on the edge of a bathhouse pool and thought it was a curiosity. It is not a curiosity. A man's tool spirit is the thing he was born with, the thing that is him. It came off Elder Crane as he died and went into my collection, and it is available to me forever. I felt nothing about that at the time. I have felt a great deal about it since. 12 elite guards on the stairs. Longmei took all 12. She did it walking, without stopping, the way you go through a beaded curtain, and I went past her up the stairs while it was still happening. And then it was a hospital room with a wide window and a bed and an old man in white sitting up in it with a book. Bishop Valerius did not look surprised. Wei Lin, he said, you've grown. You bought the ice tools. I did. I hadn't expected that. I'd had 4 different plans for how to make him admit it, and he took the whole scaffolding away in 2 words. And the Blackwater Group. And the Blackwater Group. He closed the book and set it on his knee, and he was still, absolutely, entirely calm. 400 people. It cost less than you'd think. He tilted his head. I want you to understand that I offered first. I offered generously, twice. Everything after that was your decision. I have replayed that sentence more times than any other sentence in my life. Then he got out of bed and his spirit came out, and the room became weather, ice rain. Level 78, Spirit Saint, 8 rings, and the top half of that hospital came off as his spirit avatar unfolded, a rain dragon, 40 meters of it, coiled through the ruin of 3 floors, and every drop of water in the air became a needle moving at the speed of sound. I opened 6 gates. 6, the number from the village. My hair had already been white for 5 years, so there was nothing left to lose there, and what I got instead was Spirit Emperor strength in a Spirit Sage Master's body for approximately 2 minutes, and after that I would be a stain. 2 minutes was plenty. I want to describe this fight properly, because it is the shortest important fight of my life. He was better than me, categorically. 8 rings against 3, 40 years of experience against 5, and for the first 90 seconds he took me apart. I have the scars. I have a shoulder that clicks. The rain dragon put me through a floor, and then through the floor under that. But he was fighting a Spirit Sage Master. That was the whole thing. In his head, the entire time, he was fighting a 12-year-old with 3 rings, and he kept leaving the openings you leave against a 12-year-old with 3 rings, and I kept not being one. At 90 seconds, I let him land a hit, on purpose, because it put me inside the coil. Then I put my right hand through his chest. No technique, nothing from the wheel. 6 gates and a fist, through the sternum of the bishop of Suotuo City, and out the other side. The rain dragon came apart into water, and fell on both of us. He was still standing. They do that. 8 rings keeps you standing for a few seconds after the thing that mattered has stopped. Who gave the order? I said. Above you. Who signed it? And Bishop Valerius smiled at me with blood coming out of his mouth. Exactly the way the Spirit King in the forest had. Exactly the way Argus had at that temperature, and did not say one word. He died like that, on his feet, smiling, holding a name. 3 of them now. 3 men who chose to die rather than finish that sentence. I stood in the ruin of a hospital with a dead bishop's blood up to my elbow, and I did not have what I came for. And something in my chest broke open in a way that had nothing to do with the 8 gates, and my eyes changed. I felt it happen. The Sharingan I'd carried since I was 11, 3 tomoe, unchanged for 5 years, turned over behind my eyes and became something else. And the pattern spun and locked, and the world went sharper and slower, and much, much wider. The Mangekyo. The system, cheerful as a shop bell, informed me that this evolution is triggered by grief. Thanks, I said. Thanks very much. I had about 11 seconds to enjoy the new eyes. Then something came in through the hole where the roof had been, and the temperature in the ruin dropped, and a voice like a rusted hinge said, "Oh dear." Wraith Douluo, Lin Mo, 9 rings, top 50 on the continent, and Hu Lei Yan had sent him to Suotuo City to find out who put a hole in her cathedral, and he had arrived 4 days later to find her bishop with a fist-sized abscess in his chest. He looked at the body, then at me, then at my arm. "You," he said, "have had a very busy afternoon." I could not move. That's the honest truth. 6 gates for 2 minutes had emptied me down past the bottom, and I was standing upright out of stubbornness and stubbornness alone. and a titled Douluo came at me across a broken floor. Long Mei stepped in front of me. I want to describe her posture because it's the thing I remember. Hands in her sleeves, head slightly tilted, the exact stance of a person waiting for a delivery to be signed for. Wraith Douluo's spirit came out. I'd never seen a ghost spirit. It is genuinely upsetting. The room went gray at the edges and the light stopped meaning anything, and something came out of that man's shadow that had too many joints. He put his hand through Long Mei's chest, through it, no resistance, and her expression did not change at all. And she reached up and put her palm flat on his sternum, and there was a crack of white light. You want to know what beats a ghost? The sun. Pure yang palm lightning, out of a girl in a delivery uniform, into a spirit made of the other thing. Wraith Douluo came off her hand and went through 2 walls and did not stand up immediately. Then she walked over to where he'd landed. I'm going to skip most of the next 90 seconds. It is not that it was gruesome, although it was. It's that it was boring, in the specific way that a completely one-sided thing is boring. She beat a titled Douluo across the ruins of a hospital at walking pace with her hands, and he could not touch her. And at the end of it, she did something to him that I am told took the Spirit Hall's finest healers 9 months to partially address, and which ended, forever, any prospect of Lin Mo having children. Then 800 city guards arrived because we had knocked down a hospital. Bao Bao. Hold on to me. The Mangekyo has one ability I understood immediately and instinctively because it had been in my head for exactly 6 minutes, and it felt like remembering rather than learning. Kamui. The world spiraled into a point in my left eye, and the 2 of us went through it, and the 800 guards of Suotuo City arrived at a ruin with 2 bodies in it and no one else at all. The scandal ran for 4 months. A bishop of the Spirit Hall murdered in his own hospital in his own city. Wraith Douluo, a titled Douluo, hospitalized and humiliated by an unidentified young woman. A regional cathedral vaporized 11 days earlier by an unknown ancient weapon. The Spirit Hall put out a bounty of 100,000 gold coins for information. They did not name me. That's the interesting part, and I've thought about why for years. My best guess is that naming me meant explaining why a 12-year-old had a grudge, and explaining that meant explaining Saint Spirit Village. An old friend of Linmo's came to Suotuo to visit him. Orchid Douluo, Hua Ling, sworn brother, 9 rings, and he sat by the bed for an hour and got the whole story, including the last part. I am told by 3 separate people, none of whom were there, that Orchid Douluo was quiet for a long moment and then said, with enormous compassion, "Never?" And that Wraith Douluo threw a bedpan at him. There was a price on my side too, and I paid it for 6 months. I could not open a gate, not one. 6 gates, twice in 5 years, had scarred something inside me that does not appear on any diagram, and the system put it in writing. No 8 gates for 180 days, or the damage becomes permanent. 6 months of being, functionally, a normal spirit sage master with a very good sword collection. I spent most of it grinding, but there was one night in there I want to keep. We were on the roof of the dormitory because it was summer and the dormitory was an oven. Long Mei had brought food because Long Mei always brought food. The fields below the academy had fireflies in them, thousands, the whole slope going on and off like something breathing. "You've been quiet," she said. For 6 months. I lay there and looked at the fireflies for a while. "I got him," I said. "The bishop. That's done. My grandfather is alive and there are 90 people from that village still walking around, and I got the man who did it." I put my arm over my eyes, and it didn't do anything. It's exactly as heavy as it was. Long Mei thought about that seriously, the way she thought about everything, with her chin on her knees. "Yes," she said, "that's how that works." "Thanks." "You're welcome." She ate a bun. "You'll get the other one too, and that won't do anything either. Then you'll stop, and you'll be about 20, and you'll have to think of something else to be. That's the worst comfort I've ever received." "I'm not comforting you," said Long Mei. "I'm booking my meals for the next 8 years. I laughed. First time in 6 months. "Bao Bao, whatever this is going to turn into, you get looked after. Whatever happens, wherever it goes, you eat, you sleep somewhere warm, and nobody gets to put a hand on you again." She considered this. 5 insurances, she said, and 1 housing fund. "Yes." "Then that's fine," said Long Mei, and went to sleep on the roof. I went to see my grandfather in the 4th month, and I told him, not all of it, I told him the part that was his. We sat in that cottage on the grounds of a spirit hall facility with the white building over the hedge, and I said, The man who paid for the Blackwater mercenary group was Bishop Valerius of Swotuo City, and he did it because I refused a job offer, and he is dead, and I did it with my hand. Elder Giles sat there for a long time with his cup in both hands. He was 78 by then. He'd gone smaller in the shoulders, and he'd started needing a stick on wet days, and he had 4 acres of hedge that he loved, and a grudge with a gardener named Joe. 90 of them got out, he said, eventually. Yes. I've got the list. I write to 11. He turned the cup around. Aunt Liu's in Nuoding. The girl's 5 now. Runs everywhere. Grandfather, I know what you're asking me, he said, and I'm not going to say it, because you don't need me to. You did what you did. I'd have done it slower and worse. Then he looked up at me, and for a second he was the man in the good clothes in the front room, holding his own hands, offering to kneel to a deacon for a piece of paper. He was a spirit saint, Elder Giles said, that old bishop. 70-something, wasn't he? 78. He drank his tea. You told me you'd get stronger than a titled Douluo. In our front room, you were 11 and you'd been beaten half to death in a road. I remember. You were about 2/3 right, said my grandfather, and I've decided that's close enough. Then he made me look at the roses on the north side, which were a lost cause, and complained about Joe for 40 minutes. Sage Master started stage 2 of my training on the first day of the 7th month. You've got power, he said. You have absurd, structurally unsound, frankly offensive amounts of power. What you don't have is a record. I've got 100 straight wins in the beginner's pit. Under a false name. Well, yes. So get a badge. He handed me a form. The Great Spirit Arena issues Silver Spirit Fighter badges. To get one, you need a verified win record in the middle arena, in team format, because team format is where you learn the one thing you have never once had to learn. Which is? How to lose slowly, said Sage Master, on purpose, so that somebody else can win. He paired me with Rufus for the 2-on-2s. Rufus, whose spirit is a sausage. Rufus, who cannot fight at all, in any respect. Rufus, who upon hearing the pairing said, "Oh no," and then, after thinking about it, "Oh, actually, this is great for me." And I registered under a name, because everything at that arena is under a name. I picked Ye Gu Chung, Solitary Defeat Seeker, the greatest swordsman in a story from another world. A man who got so strong he had to go and live in a cave with an eagle because there was nobody left to fight. I thought it was funny. It stopped being funny in about 3 weeks, when 8,000 people started chanting it. Our first middle arena match was against the Yin Yang brothers. 2 brothers, level 39 each, and their spirits fused. An actual 2-headed hellhound, both of them inside it. 4 legs, 2 minds, and a fighting style built on the fact that nobody can watch 2 heads at once. Rufus hid behind me. He was very open about this. He announced it to the arena. I looked at the hellhound and had a thought that I want to be honest about, because it's the least sympathetic thought I have ever had, and it is the reason for everything that followed. The thought was, I am bored. There is no invincible sword technique in this world, I said, only invincible men. Bite. Congratulations, host, for reciting a classic line from Ye Gu Chung, Dugu 9 swords. I have had a lot of things put into my head by the wheel. Spear technique, sword formulas, 12 years of a musician's hands. Dugu 9 swords is the only one that changed how I see. It is not a set of moves. It is a way of looking at somebody. Every posture a living thing can take has a flaw in it. Not a weak point, a flaw. An inevitable one, geometric, present in the posture itself. Dugu 9 swords teaches you to see the flaw instead of the person. I looked at the 2-headed hellhound, and I did not see a 2-headed hellhound. I saw about 40 flaws, arranged. Then I spent half an hour practicing on it. Not fighting, practicing. I stood in the middle of the arena and cut it 108 times. Shallow, precise, testing angles, working through the form from the first stroke to the last while 8,000 people watched. The hellhound was genuinely good. 2 minds in 1 body means it can look 2 ways, and it means the left head can commit to something while the right head keeps its options open. And for the first 4 minutes it made me think. Then I found the flaw in it, and the flaw was not in either head, it was in the shoulders. 2 brothers sharing 4 legs have to agree about the shoulders, and agreement takes time, a fraction of a beat, every single time the body changes direction. And once you have seen that, you cannot stop seeing it, and the fight is over as an intellectual matter about 25 minutes before it ends as a physical one. So I kept cutting, angle 61, Angle 62. Somewhere around minute 20, the crowd noise changed. It went from excitement to something quieter and less comfortable, which is the sound a large group of people make when they realize they are not watching a fight, they are watching somebody do homework. Rufus, behind me, said, "Are you nearly done? I've eaten all my own sausages." At minute 31, the twins surrendered, from inside the Hellhound, out loud, in unison. I have felt bad about that one ever since. Not about winning, about the 30 minutes. Rufus came out from behind me and waved at the crowd. "Great teamwork," he said. The Berserk team was the first real team we drew, and the trouble started in the lounge before the match. Chin Yu had come to watch. "They're heavy," a man called Furious Boar made a remark about her. And then he made a second one, and then he put his hand out to touch her hair. I took 4 of his fingers off with the edge of a shield from the gate of Babylon. The stewards came. There was a great deal of shouting. It went to the arena master, who looked at the 4 fingers on the lounge floor, and at Chin Yu, and at the 8 witnesses, and ruled that the match would proceed as scheduled. Furious Boar came into that arena with his hand bandaged and his whole team behind him, and every intention of killing me. They were good. 4 berserkers and a buffer, and their buffer was excellent. He stacked all 4 of them into a rage state that put a level 38 man's output into the 50s. I let them all connect. That's what the crowd saw. 4 berserkers, buffed to the sky, going through me with everything they had, over, and passing through. The Mangekyo's second ability is intangibility, not dodging, not a barrier. For as long as I can hold it, matter simply does not have an opinion about me. Attacks pass through, I pass through walls, and the whole concept of hitting me becomes a category error. I walked. That's all I did for the first 90 seconds. I walked slowly through 4 raging men and let them hit me a total of perhaps 60 times, and each time their weapons went through my chest and out the other side, and they had to keep swinging because stopping would mean thinking about it. You can watch a man's mind come apart in an arena. It takes about a minute. Then I stopped being intangible and killed the match. I had a spear in the gate of Babylon that I had taken off a Changwei student in an inn yard. Green bamboo, quite a nice piece. I put it through Furious Boar's shoulder and pinned him to the arena wall with it. Then I cut down the other 4 with Dugu 9 swords. 4 cuts, 1 each. Every one of them into the flaw, and every one of them non-lethal, because Sage Master had been very clear about the badge requirements, and because by then I had started to think about what I was building. Silver Spirit Fighter Badge, awarded in the 12th week. Rufus got one too. He had it framed. The victory dinner was where I learned my limits, and my limits are 2.5 cups. Zhu Qingshu made a speech. It was a genuinely good speech. She stood up at that table with a cup in her hand and apologized to me, sincerely, at length, for the first 2 months of knowing me, and then apologized to Mei Li, and then to Rufus, and then she got emotional and started apologizing to the waiter. Everybody drank. Everybody. I woke up at 11 the next morning on the floor of a room that was not mine, under a table, wearing somebody else's coat, with absolutely no memory of anything after Rongrong's 4th apology. Mei Li was standing over me with her arms folded. Where am I? The girls' common room. I sat up very fast and hit my head on the table. How did I get to the girls' common room? You walked, said Mei Li, singing, and refused, for the next 4 years, to tell me anything else about it. Kuo Ming claims he has the whole story. He has never once told it. He brings it up roughly every 6 weeks. We won 27 straight team matches in the month that followed. 2 of them are worth telling. The 19th was against a team called the Iron Vine, and the Iron Vine had done their homework. They'd watched everything Ye Gu Chung had ever done in that building, and they had built an answer. And the answer was, never let him close. Never let him see you. Never fight him on the ground. 6 of them on the rafters, ranged spirits, all of them, and a smoke ability that filled the whole platform floor to a height of about 2 meters. I stood in a cloud, alone, listening to bolts arrive out of a ceiling I could not see. It worked for about 4 minutes. I took 3 hits I still think about, and Rufus spent the entire time under a shield sausage, making increasingly editorial noises. Then I stopped trying to get up to them and started cutting the building. Blue Lotus, sword chi-like lotus, straight up through the rafters. 9 blades stacked in 1 stroke into structural timber 6 times. The Great Spirit Arena had to close the middle platform for 11 days for repairs, and the Iron Vine came down all at once in a shower of their own cover, and the arena master had a great deal to say to me about it afterward, and I paid for the roof out of my winnings. The 24th was the one that changed my sword. Their captain was an older man, a professional, level 49, and his spirit was a straight blade and nothing else. No transformation, no beast, a sword, and 40 years of using it. He was the first person in that building who was better at swordsmanship than me. Not stronger, better. He read Douluo 9 swords off me in the first 30 seconds. I watched him do it. I watched him stop reacting to my hands and start reacting to my shoulders, and he cut me twice across the forearm to prove a point. And I got angry, which is the only reason it happened. Blue Lotus level 4 came out of me in the middle of that fight like something breaking through ice. Level 4 is where the sword formula stops being a technique and becomes an intent. Sword intent. You put it into the air around you, and everything hostile in that air becomes slower and less certain and slightly less willing. He stopped mid-step. He was a professional. He had 40 years. He stood 4 meters from a 12-year-old in a building he'd fought in for a decade, and he lowered his blade and stepped over the line, and afterward he came and found me in the tunnel and asked very politely who my teacher had been. A poet, I said, which was true, and made him extremely angry. The second is the money. I had been betting on myself. The house at the Great Spirit Arena offers odds, and the odds on Ye Gu Cheng's team had started at 4-1 and had come down over a month to something insulting, and I had been putting everything I had on every single match through a very confused clerk since week 1. 50,000 gold coins. I mention it because of what happened next, which is that Overseer Hong of the Great Spirit Arena came to Shrek Academy in person, hat in hands, to beg. He arrived at 8 in the morning. He waited in Walter's outer office for 2 hours because Walter made him, which I want to note was a business decision and not an accident. Then he explained the situation, and the situation was arithmetic. There was a team in the main arena called the Emperor Fighting Team, 7 members, all of them at least level 40, and they had held the main platform for 8 months without losing once. A house makes its money on uncertainty. When a team stops losing, the odds on them collapse, and the punters stop betting on the fight and start betting on the margin. And then one day, the entire building is a machine for handing money to people who can count. The Great Spirit Arena had been paying out for 8 straight months. We're 3 weeks from something I can't fix, said Overseer Hong. Then find a stronger team, said Walter. There isn't one. That's the problem. Every team on the continent that could beat them has looked at the numbers and decided not to try. Because losing to the Emperor Fighting Team is now free, and beating them earns you nothing. He turned his hat over. Please, anybody at all who might make it interesting. Walter wanted a fee, a large one, up front in writing. I put 50,000 gold coins on the table in his office instead and told him to keep his fee because the academy needed a new dormitory roof and because I did not want the Great Spirit Arena owning any part of what I was about to do to it. Walter counted it twice. Where did a 12-year-old get 50,000 gold coins? Gambling. On what? Myself, I said. Exclusively. And then I explained the plan, and Huo Ming started laughing about 90 seconds in and could not stop. The Emperor Fighting Team, in order of how much trouble they were. Long Qian, Captain. Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon, level 44, and a young man with the specific poise of somebody whose grandfather runs a sect and who has never had to be rude about it. Jia Rong. Azure Phosphorus Snake, Poison Control, and I want to flag her now because she was, in a straight fight, the single most dangerous person in that arena. Her poison does not need to break your skin. It gets into the air, and it gets into you through the eyes. The Stone Brothers, 2 of them, both Black Tortoise, both defense. A wall with a second wall behind it. Li Bo, agility. A ghost leopard, fast in the dark, and the only one of them who bothered to study us. And Wan 9 hearts begonia. Group healing, continuous, on the whole team at once, which is the reason nobody had beaten them in 8 months. You cannot win an attrition fight against a team that does not lose attrition. 8,000 seats. The Great Spirit Arena had sold every one of them, and then sold standing room, because the house had spent 3 weeks advertising a fixture it desperately needed to lose money on. And the odds board, at the start of the match, had Shrek Academy at 11-1. We came out onto that sand and did not look like much. 7 of us, average age 13. I want to describe the first 5 minutes exactly as the crowd experienced them. Sun Chang went first. He came in with the Phoenix, big and loud, straight into the Stone Brothers' wall, and he hit that wall 4 times, and on the 4th time, Li Bo came around his flank in the shadow of it and put him down. Out. One down in under a minute, and the crowd made a noise. Then Rufus, who cannot fight and who went and stood in front of Jia Rong anyway, which I want on the record. He lasted 11 seconds. He lasted 11 seconds on purpose, and he made them all watch him do it. And while they were watching him, Qin Yu got past 3 of them and nearly reached the healer. Nearly. Jia Rong caught her with the air poison, and Qin Yu went down on one knee, and Huo Ming went in after her and took a full Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Strike to get her out, and then both of them were out. Zhu Qingshu, unprotected, went out 14 seconds later. Lian Yu and Mei Li lasted the longest, because of course they did. They held the left side of that platform against 5 people for 1 minute and 40 seconds, and I want that recorded properly, because in the arena's official summary it takes up 1 line. Mei Li went first into Li Bo and put him on his back. Li Bo is a ghost leopard, which is to say the fastest thing on that team, and a 13-year-old girl with no weapon put him flat on the sand in under 3 seconds, and then had to leave immediately because Jia Rong turned the air around her into poison. Lian Yu's blue-silver grass was under that sand the entire time. Nobody watching understood what was happening. It looks like nothing. It looks like a boy standing still with a weed. What was actually happening was that every step the Emperor fighting team took on the left side of that platform cost them something. A half beat, a shifted ankle, a strike that landed 4 inches off, and Long Qian spent 1.5 minutes getting slowly, invisibly, extremely angry. He broke through in the end by simply not walking. He came in off a lightning charge, straight over the sand, and Lian Yu had planned for that too, and the 2 of them collided in the middle of the left side hard enough that the crowd stood up. Lian Yu lost. He was 13, at level 29, against a level 44 captain. But he made a level 44 captain use his signature ability twice in a fight the captain expected to win by attrition, and he cost him about 1/3 of his spirit power, and I want you to hold on to that, because it is the reason for the next 4 minutes. Then Mei Li was over the edge, and Lian Yu followed her. 5 minutes and 11 seconds, all 7 of them. The Great Spirit Arena went absolutely silent, because 8,000 people had just watched a school get taken apart, and because there was 1 person left standing on that platform. Then the arena master's voice came over the spirit tool, sounding a little unwell, and announced revised odds. Ye Gucheng alone against the Emperor fighting team at 100-1. And down in the tunnel, 7 eliminated Shrek Academy students, lying in various states of injury on the concrete, started grinning at each other and could not stop. Because Walter had put every coin the Academy had on that number about 90 seconds earlier. That was the plan. That was the whole plan from the moment I laid it out in Walter's office. Lose 7, lose them fast, lose them convincingly, lose them in a way that makes the house move the line, and then collect. Huo Ming had asked at the time 1 reasonable question. And then you beat all 7 of them by yourself? Yes, I said. You know I have to actually get hit for this to work. Yes. Jia Rong opened the poison the second the line moved. The whole platform, not a cloud you can walk out of, a saturation, wall to wall, jade green and thin enough that most of the crowd could not see it, and every breath I took was carrying it, and every inch of exposed skin was drinking it. It got into me. I want to be honest about that, because there's a version of this where I'm immune, and it isn't true. I felt it in my throat and behind my eyes within about 4 seconds, and I felt my left arm start to go stupid. So I burned it out. Green Lotus Core Flame on the inside. 11 months of a paper cup, the ability to run a heavenly flame at a precise output for a sustained duration without touching what's around it. I ran it through my own bloodstream at a temperature that cooked the poison out of me, and the smoke came out of my mouth, and I want to tell you that the sensation is exactly as pleasant as it sounds. Jia Rong watched a boy exhale green smoke and take a breath and stand up straight, and she said, quite clearly, into 8,000 seats of silence, "That's not possible." Then the Stone Brothers formed up. Both black tortoises, shells interlocked, Long Qian behind them charging his dragon, Wan behind him healing, Jia Rong flooding, Li Bo loose. It's a genuinely superb formation. It's why nobody had beaten them. It has 1 hole, and the hole is that the wall has to open for the captain to attack. So I waited. I stood in the middle of that platform, in a poison fog, alone, and did nothing at all for 11 seconds, and let the crowd get very uncomfortable, and let Long Qian finish charging. Then the shells opened for him, and I opened 4 gates, 4, plus the inner lotus, on a body that had not been allowed to open a single one for 6 months and had spent that entire time getting stronger anyway. Supersonic. Straight through the gap in the wall, past the blue lightning tyrant dragon strike as it was leaving the ground, and I hit Long Qian in the chest with my shoulder at a speed that took him off his feet, and I did not stop. I carried him across the platform, 20 meters, and I dropped him off the edge. 1. The formation collapsed behind me because the formation was built around him. Wan was already turning to run when I marked her, Dance of the Moon God, a crescent on her back, and I blinked to it. She went off the platform very gently, actually. I picked her up and set her down over the line because she was a healer and had done nothing to me except be excellent at her job. 2. Jiarong I did not set down gently. She was flooding the platform with something that had been designed to kill me, and she was very good at it. And I came out of the poison directly in front of her, and she got one hand up and got a genuinely respectable ability off at point-blank range, and I took it on the shoulder and kept walking. I picked her up by the collar and threw her off the Great Spirit Arena's main platform in front of 8,000 people. 3. I want to be honest. I turned around expecting to fight 4 more. The Stone brothers were already stepping over the line, both of them hands up, one of them saying something to the referee about the rules of forfeiture. Li Bo went with them. Their buffer had never come out from behind the wall at all. The referee looked at me, then at 4 men standing outside the boundary with their hands in the air, and the Great Spirit Arena came apart. I have been in loud rooms. I put a shell into a cathedral, and the sound came back off the hills 9 seconds later. 8,000 people in an enclosed stone bowl, all of whom have just lost money, is a different category of loud, and about a third of them were happy about it, and the third that had bet on us at 100 to 1 were happy in a way that I think frightened the house. Walter collected in cash. It took 2 hours and 4 carts. So, 6 years earlier, I was standing in a horse stance on a hill in St. Spirit Village with thighs shaking, being told by my best friend that my life was incorrect. No manual, no clan, no family beyond an old man who complained about chickens, and 1 pine branch, and 1 idea about why people get strong. 6 years later, I walked off the main platform of the Great Spirit Arena with 3 black rings, twin spirits, a treasury in the air behind my shoulder, a titled Douluo kneeling to a mask I bought for 11 silver, 50,000 gold multiplied by 100, and a bald spirit saint holding my coat. The village is gone. 90 of them made it out. The man who bought it is dead, and I put my hand through his chest myself, and my grandfather is alive and complaining about the quality of the grounds he keeps. That's the arc. That part's finished. I closed it. Here's the part that isn't. Valerius died smiling and holding a name. So did Argus. So did the Spirit King in the forest, who used his last breath to tell me that black isn't necessarily black. 3 men chose to die rather than finish that sentence, which means the thing above Valerius is worse than dying to 3 different kinds of professional. I still don't know whose village that was, and they know mine now. There was a boy on a hill watching my house burn, beautiful, in gold, very still, with no Adam's apple, and I have never once in 6 years managed to find out who he was, or why the shepherd who described him to me could not stop describing him. And there's a dog on my windowsill. Test 1, survive a spirit saint. Test 2, spend 4 years robbing the graves of every great sect on this continent while a floating black dog points at the ground and says, dig. Test 3, he told me, is surviving them. I asked him how many enemies I'd made out there in the dark, in tombs, at 13, with a shovel. And the Black Emperor opened his third eye about halfway and said, oh, most of them. Then he went back to sleep. Ask me in a year whether I regret the digging.